Chapter 17:14. The voice was cold and calm, but it also carried a powerful pressure that made people dare not defy it. Everyone present could not help but look in the direction of the voice. On the black wall, the power around the huge totem suddenly surged. The void rippled with it. Then a tall and slender figure walked out from it. The person who came was handsome and elegant. He was dressed in a snow-white robe and he looked elegant. In an instant, everything in the surroundings seemed to dim in color. All the spiritual aura in the world seemed to converge on this one person. Everyone was silent for a moment. The man raised his eyes slightly, and a pair of eyes that were as deep as the sea quietly looked at the crowd. It was a very light look, but it was so dense that no one dared to look at it directly. When he first appeared, everyone thought he was like an immortal. But when they saw this pair of eyes, they were shocked to realize it was an illusion. Everything that happened before was just an illusion. This was not an immortal who flew down from the 9 mysterious heavens, but a devil who stepped on fire from hell. However, such a feeling was fleeting. Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly, and that thick layer of bloody killing intent quietly dissipated. When they looked at him again, that pair of phoenix eyes had returned to their usual gentle, elegant, indifferent and distant look. Rong Xiu. Seeing the person who came, Nan Suhui and Chu Ning were the first to react, and they both looked happy. Previously they were still worried that he would not be able to come out safely. Now that they saw that he was safe and sound, and even his clothes were as spotless as usual, they immediately relaxed. He nodded slightly at Nan Suhui and Chu Ning, indicating that he was fine. Then he raised his eyes slightly and looked at Sheng Guanjing and Yu Hongshan. Since he came out, the two of them had temporarily stopped fighting. Sensing Rong Xiu's cold gaze on him, Yu Hongshan's heart skipped a beat. Danger. Even Sheng Guanjing did not cause such a strong sense of danger to him. Yu Hongshan's mind raced. This man called Rong Xiu looked to be in his early 20s. But his strength was unfathomable. Even he couldn't detect it. More importantly, out of so many people, only Rong Xiu came out unscathed. This made Yu Hongshan vigilant. Senior Shengguan, is this the person you mentioned before who betrayed you? Rong Xiu asked calmly. Sheng Guanjing came back to his senses and nodded. He vaguely felt that there was something different about Rong Xiu, but he couldn't tell what it was. Rong Xiu nodded. Please do as you wish. He didn't expect this person to still be alive. However, this was also good. Sheng Guanjing would be able to deal with him personally to take revenge for what happened back then. Don't worry, no one here will interfere with your matter. You can do whatever you want with him. Rong Xiu said calmly. Sheng Guanjing's heart stirred slightly. He finally knew what was wrong. When Rong Xiu said these words, he was using a declarative sentence. His tone was too matter-of-fact, as if he didn't care about the objections of others at all. To put it bluntly, Rong Xiu's words were actually for everyone present to hear. This was an order. Sheng Guanjing was secretly shocked. He knew that Rong Xiu had a noble status and had always been high and mighty. But apart from him, the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan, was also here today. The Nan family's status was higher than Yuntian Towers. If he said this, Nan Yifan, Sheng Guanjing subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan and was suddenly stunned. Why did Nan Yifan's reaction seem a little off? Nan Yi had also noticed this. After seeing Rong Xiu appear, her emotions were very complicated. Although all the previous twists and turns had already worn away most of her liking for Rong Xiu, it was very difficult for her to completely oppose Rong Xiu. But Rong Xiu obviously didn't take her seriously and even came out to confront her. It would be a lie to say that Nan Yi didn't feel upset. At the same time, she was also angry. Hence, she finally decided to ask her father for help, Nan Yifan. Rong Xiu and the rest were extremely rude to her previously. Now that her father was here, let's see how they could still be arrogant? However, Nan Yifan didn't respond even after Nan Yi shouted twice. Father? Father? She frowned strangely and tugged at Nan Yifan's sleeve. Only then did Nan Yifan come back to his senses and look at her with a stiff expression. What's wrong? Nan Yi frowned even more. What's wrong? Wasn't the situation already right in front of her? Father, are you all right? Nan Yi asked nervously. He had always been high-spirited and she rarely saw him with such an expression. Why didn't you mention it before? Nan Yifan didn't finish speaking, but Nan Yi already understood. Was he talking about Rong Xiu? Nan Yi was about to defend herself when she suddenly remembered what Rong Xiu had said previously. Wait a minute. From the looks of it, her father and Rong Xiu really knew each other. Patriarch Nan, long time no see. Rong Xiu looked at Nan Yifan and said indifferently. Nan Yifan's expression instantly became subtle. his jaw tightened and he squeezed out an extremely stiff smile. "A long time no see, successor." As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the field instantly became even more strange. Almost everyone looked at Nan Yifan with a strange look in their eyes. Especially the people from the Nan family. When they heard Nan Yifan call out the words, "successor," so politely, it was as if they had seen a ghost. He was the patriarch of the Nan family. Whether it was status, experience or strength, he was much higher than Rongxiu. Why did it seem like he was the one who was more nervous and perturbed now? Nan Yi widened her eyes. Father? She knew her father too well. He would never be so polite to someone for no reason. In fact, there was even a hint of reverence and fear. Although Nan Yifan hid his emotions very well, Nan Yi, who was standing beside him, saw everything. Nan Yifan looked at her sternly. This girl actually skipped over such an important matter. If he had known that Rongxiu was also involved, Nan Yi's heart turned cold from his gaze. No wonder Rongxiu directly guessed their identity and was so disdainful. They originally thought that he was pretending, but now, they were afraid that wasn't the case. But why did her father have to be so polite to a mere successor of Yuntian Tower? Nan Yi's heart was in turmoil. When she thought of the things that had happened before, she felt terrible. Nan Yifan couldn't be bothered with her as he forced a smile and cupped his hands at Rongxiu. "I didn't expect the successor to be here too. What a coincidence, ha! What a coincidence." Rongxiu's eyes were cold and his voice was indifferent. "The Shangguanyu that you said you wanted to teach a lesson to is the mistress of Yuntian Tower? I's princess consort." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17-15. Nan Yifan's mind buzzed. It was as if an invisible hammer had smashed him on the head, causing him to freeze on the spot. The matriarch of Yuntian Tower. That's right. He finally remembered why the name Shangguanyu sounded familiar. Wasn't that the princess whom Rongxiu had personally appointed? This matter had spread like wildfire among the many aristocratic families in the Divine Ruins. However, the Nan family had never cared much about these things, and their subordinates would never mention it in front of him. He had only found out about it after inquiring about it in private. However, this matter had passed for a long time, and almost no one around him had mentioned it. Over time he had forgotten about it. That was why he didn't think of it when he heard the name Shangguanyu. Miscalculation. What a miscalculation. At this moment, Nan Yifan was so regretful that his intestines turned green. That was Rongxiu's woman. Why did he have to take things so hard that he threatened to cause trouble for her? He even brought so many people from the Nan family to fall out with them? Look at these people. Among them there was the father of Shangguanyu, the master of Shangguanyu, and the Taizu of Shanghaiyu. Offending them was undoubtedly offending Shangguanyu. Wasn't that the same as offending Rongxiu? Nan Yifan finally couldn't laugh anymore. This time even his stiff fake smile became very forced. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and spat out a few words with great difficulty. Misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Hey, didn't second Miss Nan just say that they were reduced to such a miserable state because of that B*teeth in Shangguanyu? In the almost suffocating silence, Elder Yu suddenly spoke. He blinked. Just now, the head of the Nan family seemed to have said that he wanted to avenge them. How did it suddenly become a misunderstanding? Yi Zhao glanced at him. After so many years, his bad habit of watching a show had not changed. However, this time he was happy to watch the show. As soon as Elder Yu spoke, Nan Yifan had a bad premonition. After listening to him, he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. Why did this Yu just have to come out and stir up trouble at this time? If he didn't do it on purpose, then he must have seen a ghost. However, he could no longer be bothered to question Elder Yu. Instead, he immediately looked up at Rongxiu. No, it's not like that. Therefore, meeting Rongxiu's eyes, Nan Yifan's voice suddenly stopped. He felt as if his throat was being strangled by an invisible hand. The rest of his words were stuck in his throat and he couldn't say anything. That deep and cold gaze fell on her, chilling her to the bone. Rongxiu's voice was light as he looked at Nan Yi. Is what Elder Yu said true? Nan Yi felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. She had never felt so clearly that she was only one step away from death. A terrifying pressure instantly enveloped her. It almost made her unable to breathe. Nan Yifan hurriedly took a step forward and stood in front of Nan Yi as he hurriedly explained. Successor. It's not like that. Yi didn't say that. So, Elder Yu was lying in public and deceiving I? Rongxiu's question made Nan Yifan speechless. Elder Yu crossed his arms and raised his chin. Patriarch Nan, aren't you being too mean by saying that? To think that I've been speaking up for you in front of the patriarch. Is this how you repay me? Nan Yifan wanted to tear his mouth apart. Who was the one being mean? Wasn't he the one who came out to stir up trouble first? And he even said that he spoke up for him in front of Yi Zhao? He didn't hear any of that. He only heard that he exposed Yi in public and put all of them in danger. Nan Yifan took a deep breath and forced himself to ignore Elder Yu. There are indeed many misunderstandings in today's matter. I can personally explain from the beginning. Father. He's just the successor of Yuntian Tower. Why do you have to be so polite? A voice full of unwillingness and anger suddenly sounded. It was Nan Yuxing. Everything was fine at first, but ever since Rong Xiu appeared, everything seemed to have suddenly changed. He really didn't understand why his father was so polite to Rong Xiu. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was in awe and fear. If it was any other time, Nan Yuxing would never ask this question. Anyone with a brain could see that there was something wrong with Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiu. However, Nan Yuxing had already lost his mind. He was seriously injured and his mind was already a little muddled. When he saw this scene, he was instantly furious and burned the last string of reason in his heart. Thus, he suddenly shouted this sentence in a crazy manner. Yuxing. Nan Yifan was also stunned, and then endless anger surged in his heart. This unfilial son, does he know what he's saying? The situation was already difficult enough for him, and now that Nan Yuxing had interfered, the situation became even worse. Nan Yifan suddenly raised his hand and shouted sternly. You. Come and apologize to the successor immediately. His words didn't serve as a warning to Nan Yuxing. Instead, it made him even crazier. Previously, when he was facing Rong Xiu, his attitude had always been high and mighty. Even if he wasn't a match for Rong Xiu, he actually didn't take Rong Xiu seriously. How could Yuntian Tower be compared to the Nan family? However, now Nan Yifan was asking him to bow down to Rong Xiu? He would never agree. He's not worthy. Nan Yuxing straightened his neck and shouted. Slap. A loud and clear sound of a slap suddenly rang out. It was Nan Yifan who gave him a hard slap across the air. Nan Yuxing's voice instantly disappeared. His cheek was slapped to one side and it quickly became red and swollen. Nan Yifan was so angry that his chest violently rose and fell, and his palm was still trembling slightly. Eldest young master. The elders standing at the side were also stunned when they saw the situation. They only came back to their senses when they saw blood seeping out from the corner of Nan Yuxing's mouth. Just as they were about to go over to help Nan Yuxing, they heard Nan Yifan shout again. No one is allowed to help him. His voice was stern and the two elders didn't dare to disobey. They could only stand there awkwardly and let Nan Yuxing's body sway and fall to the ground. Nan Yuxing was already seriously injured, and Nan Yifan had used a lot of strength in this slap. It wasn't something that he could withstand. Almost everyone didn't understand why Nan Yifan's attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. However, they weren't stupid. They knew that there must be an unknown reason, so they all tactfully kept their mouths shut. Nan Yifan closed his eyes, then looked at Rong Xiu. Successor, my son offended you just now. Please forgive him. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Just because of this slap? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17-16. It was obvious what he meant. Not enough. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. He knew that Rong Xiu wasn't someone to be trifled with and that it wouldn't be easy to get past him. Hence, he purposely gave Nan Yuxing a tight slap. However, Rong Xiu did not appreciate it. He clenched his teeth and walked over to Nan Yuxing without saying a word. He dragged him up and gave him another slap. This time it was a slap to the face. Crisp. Loud. Before Nan Yuxing could react, there was a loud noise in his head and a sharp pain came. Bang. He fell to the ground again and spat out a mouthful of blood. This time, Nan Yuxing was so dizzy that he almost fainted. Nan Yifan paused. Rong Xiu did not say a word. He took a deep breath and gave Nan Yuxing a few more slaps. Nan Yuxing could not say a word this time. After spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. How could he not feel distressed and upset? However, at this moment he could not think of any other way to solve the problem. At this point, Rong Xiu finally spoke. Why do you have to do this, Nan family head? I am not a narrow-minded person. Why would I care about what he said? Nan Yifan spat out a mouthful of blood. You don't care? If you don't care, why didn't you say anything earlier? You only spoke when Nan Yuxing fainted? However, he could not say these words directly. Nan Yifan threw Nan Yuxing to the ground. He spoke rudely to the saint and should be taught a lesson. Speaking of which, it's my fault for not teaching my son well. I'm really ashamed. When Nan Yifan said this, there was a hint of anger on his face. It was as if he wanted to kick Nan Yuxing a few more times. Rong Xiu looked at Nan Yuxing, who was lying on the ground, and his thin red lips curled up slightly. No matter what, Nan Yuxing is the only son of the Nan family head. Now that his core of essence has been shattered and he has become a cripple, how can he bear the punishment of the Nan family head? As he spoke, he raised his chin. Elders, please treat him as soon as possible. Every word was like a steel knife, ruthlessly stabbing into Nan Yifan's heart. His face paled, but in the end he waved his hand. The two elders standing at the side hurriedly stepped forward. It wasn't easy for Nan Yuxing's condition to take a turn for the better. With these few slaps, all of his previous efforts had been wasted. It was even worse than the beginning. Nan Yifan then turned around and looked at Rong Xiu. His expression was extremely restrained. Saint, there were many misunderstandings in the past. However, I have already taught them a harsh lesson. Do you think we can let this matter pass? Anyone could tell that Nan Yifan was begging for mercy. Elder Yu couldn't help but chuckle and whisper, interesting. Although Yuntian Tower was a first-class aristocratic family, it was still slightly inferior to the Nan family. It was reasonable to say that when Rong Xiu and Nan Yifan went up against each other, Rong Xiu should be the one at a disadvantage. However, the truth was exactly the opposite. They really didn't know what Nan Yifan was afraid of. Or had they underestimated Rong Xiu before? Yi Zhao put his hands behind his back and narrowed his eyes slightly. However, he didn't say anything. In fact, he was also thinking about this problem in his heart. Perhaps, their understanding of Rong Xiu was really far from enough. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly as if he had heard something funny. Then he said slowly, "You're right. Patriarch Nan, did you think wrongly? From the beginning to the end I was blaming Nan Yi, not him." He said the last few words very slowly and clearly, one word at a time. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. Rong Xiu was playing with him. However, before he could explode, Rong Xiu continued. "You provoked her time and time again, but you was magnanimous and didn't take it to heart. Unfortunately, you don't know what it means to quit when you're ahead. Not only do you not have the slightest bit of remorse, but you're even slandering and humiliating her in public now." Rong Xiu spoke very slowly. His voice was light, but there was a hint of coldness in it. Nanny only felt that these words were like a sharp and cold knife against her neck. Back and forth, just waiting for the most suitable time to cut down ruthlessly. She trembled all over and her legs went weak unconsciously. She subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan. That. Rong Xiu wanted to kill her. He was determined to kill her. How could Nan Yifan feel good? He had already gone all out just now and almost lost half of Nan Yuxing's life, but he didn't expect that Rong Xiu still wouldn't let it go. After hesitating for a long time, Nan Yifan said with difficulty, "What exactly does the saint want?" Rong Xiu must have seen through all his tricks at a glance. It was obvious that Rong Xiu didn't care about those things at all. He would only stop when he was truly satisfied. So, Nan Yifan simply chose to ask directly. Rong Xiu laughed. "Patriarch Nan is straightforward enough. Then I won't beat around the bush." He raised his chin slightly and glanced at Nan Yi coldly. "I want her tongue." His voice was low and his tone was extremely light, but it was not to be disobeyed. This wasn't a compromise or a discussion, but an order. Nan Yifan felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on his chest. He knew that Rong Xiu had always been ruthless and merciless. Today their people had offended him ruthlessly, so he would definitely take revenge. But this request was really too much. He only had this one daughter and had always regarded her as the apple of his eye. Usually he would coax her for a long time and dote on her very much. Now that Rong Xiu wanted to cut off her tongue, Nan Yifan couldn't accept it no matter what. Nan Yi clutched his sleeves tightly. Her eyes were red and bean-sized tears kept falling. "Father. Don't be like this." She had clearly seen her elder brother's miserable state just now. At this moment she completely understood that her father was indeed extremely afraid of Rong Xiu. If her father really agreed to this request, hot tears fell on the back of Nan Yifan's hand. He closed his eyes and held Nan Yi's hand. "I don't agree to this condition." He could accept other punishments, but he was definitely not willing to sacrifice his bloodline. Just now he seemed to be extremely ruthless towards Nan Yuxing, but in fact he had been controlling his strength and skills, so he didn't cause any fatal injuries. But if he handed Nan Yi to Rong Xiu to deal with the consequences, he didn't even dare to think about it. Rong Xiu didn't look surprised, as if he had already expected this. The corners of his lips seemed to be smiling as he said lightly, "Patriarch Nan, I've already given you face." Unfortunately, he didn't want it. Nan Yifan immediately tensed up. Sensing his nervousness, Nan Yi had a bad feeling. Suddenly, she had an idea and shouted at Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu in a sharp voice. "Patriarch Yi Zhao, that Shangguan Yu privately contracted the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, which is a heinous crime. Rong Xiu is also wrong for trying to cover it up. Are you really going to sit back and do nothing? Digression, it's the last 3 days, please vote. Every extra vote can be added to the explosive update on the 11th of next month. Xiaoxiang and QQ Reading have super surprise New Year's Day activities respectively, and they have already pinned the comments section to welcome everyone to participate. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 17:17. When Elder Yu heard this, he almost laughed out loud. Nanny was really crazy. She was about to die, but she still dared to say such things? She was afraid that she wouldn't die completely. Based on the current situation, the Nan family was completely at a disadvantage. Nanny was undoubtedly treating them as her last straw, and she was still hoping that they would help her. Even if they were really here to cause trouble for Shangguan Yu, what did it have to do with her? They couldn't be bothered if Rong Xiu wanted to cut off her tongue. Yi Zhao frowned slightly, and a trace of impatience finally appeared on his face. Nanny thought that she had persuaded the other party and was secretly delighted. Then she heard Rong Xiu laugh and ask, "Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you want to help them?" Yi Zhao spat out coldly. "What does their life and death have to do with me?" The reason why he was impatient was purely because he felt that it was too noisy after hearing Nanny talk about this over and over again. Rong Xiu nodded and a smile appeared on his lips. "Thank you for your understanding, clan leader Yi Zhao." The two of them had only exchanged a few words and had already finalized the result. One couldn't be bothered, while the other was determined to kill. Nanny felt like she had fallen into an ice cave. She never expected that the other party would be so indifferent. Nanny was almost crazy after being forced into a desperate situation. She shouted at the top of her lungs. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, do you really not mind at all that Shangguan Yu contracted the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix privately? Even if the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is tarnished, you don't care at all?" Yi Zhao's eyes turned cold. He was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something and looked up. What? The sound of tides surging could be heard. Everyone looked over and realized that the energy of heaven and earth around the black wall was surging rapidly into the huge and mysterious totem. It was daytime now, and the originally clear sky quickly became gloomy. Dark clouds gathered, stacking on top of each other. The sky was covered by thick clouds, and everything between heaven and earth seemed to be shrouded in a layer of shadow. Only the totem on the black wall shone brighter and brighter. Then, with the totem as the center, the blackness on the wall suddenly began to fade away. The originally thick and mottled stones gradually became transparent, glowing with a sparkling and translucent luster. As for the totem, it finally began to show its original brilliant colors. Everyone was deeply shocked by this scene. For a moment, their minds were shaken and they didn't know how to react. This wall had endured the baptism of tens of thousands of years in the god-slaying mound, but it still stood proudly. It was always deep and heavy. Every stone piled on top of it was deeply engraved with everything that had happened here. They were solemn, ancient, and untouchable. However, at this moment their appearances had completely changed. Everyone could even see the mottled traces left behind on the surface, but only the thick black color was gone. Gradually, a slender and straight figure appeared behind the totem. "You, Chu Ning's eyes suddenly lit up, and he unconsciously took a step forward. The woman in red sitting cross-legged was none other than Yu. At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged quietly, staring intently at a transparent page in her hand. Her black hair hung down, and her side profile was beautiful and calm. Her body seemed to be shrouded in a layer of indescribable unique aura, which easily isolated all the hustle and bustle around her. From everyone's point of view, Chu Luiyue seemed to be trapped in a huge transparent space. They could see her every move, but there was a wall in the middle, which was far away and untouchable. Silence reigned in the field. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue tilted her head slightly and looked over. Her eyes were calm, but they also seemed to contain a myriad of stars, clear and bright. Immediately she frowned slightly and said lightly, "It's so noisy." Almost at the same time, a childish voice was heard. "It's so noisy." Everyone was shocked. Only then did they see that not far away from Chu Liwei, there was a little girl with her hands on her waist, looking over angrily. She looked to be no more than 3 or 4 years old. She was wearing a reddish gold lotus leaf dress, and her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string and a golden bell. Her chubby, white and tender little face was as cute as snow. It was Dumpling. At this moment, her big black grape-like eyes were burning with anger. Hot and anxious. That was real fire. "It's so noisy." Dumpling was really angry. Ever since she was swallowed into this strange space, she had been looking for traces of Ayu. After searching back and forth for a long time, she was finally pushed here by a strong force not long ago, and only then did she see Ayu. When she saw Ayu, she wanted to pounce on her. But she soon realized that Ayu seemed to be busy with something. So she waited obediently at the side. In the end, not long after, the originally dark space gradually brightened. Then she heard a lot of noise. Especially that sharp and ear-piercing female voice, which annoyed Dumpling to death. Now she was disturbing Ayu. She would never tolerate it anymore. "I've said it before." She raised her hand and pointed at Nanny. "You are really annoying." Seeing Dumpling appear and criticize her directly, Nanny panicked for a moment. But she quickly calmed down. What was there to worry about? The more this crimson gold heavenly phoenix protected Shangguanyu, the angrier clan leader Yi Zhao and the rest would be. How could the noble crimson gold heavenly phoenixes tolerate their own kind contracting with a human? Moreover, they were so loyal and sincere. This time she didn't believe that Yi Zhao and the rest could tolerate it. She sneered, turned her head and said, "Clan leader Yi Zhao, did you see that? Not only did Shangguanyu contract with your own kind, but she also ordered her around and completely treated her as her slave. Can you really take this lying down?" She thought that Yi Zhao would definitely fly into a rage after seeing this scene and hearing these words. However, Yi Zhao's reaction was completely out of Nanny's expectations. He stared intently at Dumpling, who was inside the wall. After confirming that she was safe and sound, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Then he turned to look at Nanny. Meeting those cold and dignified eyes, Nanny suddenly felt a surge of uneasiness. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yi Zhao's brows moved slightly and he said calmly and dignified, "Dumpling is Shangguanyu's contracted beast. Isn't it normal to speak up for her?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17-18. Nanyi widened her eyes in disbelief. Nan Yifan and the rest also quickly turned around and looked at Yi Zhao, almost suspecting that they were hallucinating. What did Yi Zhao just say? Very normal? He actually felt that this matter was very normal? Could it be that he's crazy? In an instant, Nanny felt that the world was in chaos. Yi Zhao. He was famous in the Divine Ruins world. Almost everyone knew how much he hated and was indifferent to the human race. But now, his own clan had formed a contract with the human race and he actually didn't care? All the words that Nanny had prepared were suddenly stuck in her throat and she couldn't say anything else. She pinched herself hard and relied on this pain to confirm that she wasn't dreaming. And those words were indeed spat out by Yi Zhao. What do you mean? Nanny stuttered. At this moment, she had already sensed that things seemed to be different from what she had expected. She wanted to try to salvage the situation, but everything seemed to be sliding in a direction that she couldn't control. Yi Zhao said indifferently. It's literally what I said. He actually didn't care about this matter at all. Nanny felt as if her heart was being gripped tightly by something. Even breathing had become difficult for him. But in that case, then, isn't that Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix equivalent to betraying the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Could it be that you also, second Miss Nan, are you kidding? Elder EU interrupted her with a grin. Dumpling is the young master appointed by our ancestors and the next clan leader of our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Anyone can betray our clan, but she is the only one who can't. His indifferent words were tantamount to a heavy hammer that smashed fiercely into Nanny's heart. Her mind buzzed and instantly went blank. Young master. That Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And it was appointed by their ancestors. Then, she said so much just now, wasn't it all a joke in their eyes? Nanny's vision turned black and she fell to the ground. Second Miss. An elder was standing by the side. Seeing this, he hurriedly went forward and supported Nanny. Second Miss, are you all right? Nanny's legs went weak and she almost couldn't stand steadily. Her body was cold and her mind was in a mess. At this moment she really wished that she would just faint. Everything that happened just now kept replaying in her mind, making her feel extremely embarrassed. She wished she could find a hole to hide in and never appear in front of these people again. To think that she had thought that by saying so much she would be able to stir up a conflict between Yi Zhao and Shang Guanyu. She had thought that she would be able to use this opportunity to destroy Shanghai Yu once and for all. Who would have thought Yi Zhao and the others had been standing on the same side as Shang Guanyu from the very beginning? From the beginning to the end she was the only one, a clown. What a joke. Nanny was trembling all over. Her face was pale and she looked miserable. Where was the dignity and arrogance of the second miss of the Nan family? Nan Yifan was also stunned by this sudden turn of events. He stood there for a long time without moving. He didn't know what to say or do. When Nanny said those words he had a laissez-faire attitude. Although he didn't show his emotions on his face like Nanny, didn't he have the same thoughts as Nanny in his heart? At this moment he couldn't be bothered to help Nanny, because he himself was panicking. Young master. The young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. He couldn't help but turn around. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, who would believe that such a little girl was actually the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Countless thoughts flashed through Nan Yifan's mind. Before this, he had never heard of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan having a young master in the Divine Ruins world. Then this matter was very likely to have happened recently. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan did seem to have held an ancestral worship ceremony some time ago. If he didn't guess wrongly, it should be at that time, but this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix was Shang Guanyu's contracted magical beast. How did she sit on the position of young master? Logically speaking, such an identity was a stain on the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was already good enough that she didn't become a sinner. How did she ascend to become the young master? Nan Yifan was extremely shocked and puzzled. But he didn't even have the qualifications or courage to ask this question. Earlier, Elder Yu had clearly said that the position of young master was personally appointed by their ancestor. He couldn't even afford to offend Yi Zhao, so how could he dare to question the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? No wonder Yi Zhao, the clan leader, had personally made a move. How could he not be worried that something had happened to the young master? Previously, he felt that Yi Zhao and Nan Yifan were very concerned about the person they were looking for. But he never expected that the true identity of that little girl would be so shocking. Everything had become a hopeless situation. Yi Zhao looked coldly at Nanny. I forgot to say that Dumpling is a rare genius in our clan. She has the most noble bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, the purest bloodline. Saying that she had tarnished the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Was there anything more ridiculous than this? Nanny's eyes rolled back and she finally fainted. The elder at the side looked at Nan Yifan with a troubled expression. Patriarch, this. Nan Yifan clenched his fists tightly and almost gritted his teeth. He was no longer in the mood to care about Nanny's situation. Today they had completely offended Rong Xiao and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was still unknown what kind of storm the entire Nan family would suffer. Fainted? Rong Xiao asked lightly. It's fine. With a wave of his sleeve, a black figure suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was a puppet made entirely of black fine iron. It was tall and wore a suit of armor that was tough and iron-blooded. Golden flames were burning where its originally empty eyes were originally. The hearts of everyone present shuddered. The combat power of this puppet was probably extremely strong. Although there were no fluctuations of origin power around his body, that terrifying pressure was extremely frightening. Rong Xiao's voice was indifferent. Sky Demon, pry open her mouth. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17-19. Upon hearing this order, the puppet immediately bowed respectfully. Then, with a tap of its foot, it charged towards Nanny. He was extremely strong and with just a stomp, several cracks appeared on the ground. As for his figure, he was already like an arrow that had left the bow, flying away at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he was already not far from Nanny. The elder supporting Nanny was shocked and immediately set up a barrier in front of him while retreating at the same time. However, these defenses couldn't even withstand a single blow from the puppet. Boom. He punched out and the barrier instantly shattered. Violent energy surged in all directions. Some of it collided with the Sky Demon, but it didn't even leave a mark. God puppet. Nan Yifan's expression also changed. He immediately rushed forward and tried to stop the sky demon. However, the sky demon's speed was not inferior to his at all. In fact, his movements were even more agile. In a flash, he bypassed him and rushed directly in front of Nanyi. Origin power surged around the elder's body. But before he could make a move, the sky demon had already kicked his wrist. Crack. The sound of bones breaking was especially crisp. Ah! That elder cried out in pain and unconsciously loosened his grip. Nanyi was instantly snatched away by the sky demon. Nan Yifan's heart sank. Yi! The sky demon ignored him and used his elbow to clamp down on Nanyi's neck, while his other hand pinched her chin tightly. The intense pain woke Nanyi up again. When she came back to her senses, she realized that she was tightly clamped down. Her chin seemed to have been dislocated, and the sky demon's strength was extremely ruthless. This directly shattered half of her jawbone. She was forced to open her mouth, and cold air continuously poured into her lungs, causing her to feel cold all over. She had a bad feeling and started to struggle frantically. However, the sky demon's combat strength was extremely strong. Even at her peak, she was no match for the sky demon, let alone now. Then something flew over quickly. Sharp. Boiling hot. Nanyi felt her vision blur. Then she heard something fall out and smash on the ground. Only then did the heavenly demon release her and return to Rong Xiu's side in a flash. Nanyi's body suddenly loosened and she fell to the ground. Her hands seemed to be pressing down on something. She turned her head stiffly. A piece of tongue with dark red blood stains was lying quietly on the ground. It was still warm. Nanyi was shocked. Then, an indescribable and terrifying pain came from his mouth. The thick smell of blood instantly filled his mouth. Nanyi widened her eyes in horror. Her tongue. That was her tongue. Rong Xiu had really cut off her tongue just now. Nanyi let out a mournful cry as she sobbed. She wanted to say something, but all that came out of her mouth was a whimper. She couldn't say another word. Nan Yifan's face paled, his body swayed, and he almost fell. He had doted on Nanyi since she was young. Now that he had to watch her tongue being cut off, how could he bear it? Blood kept flowing from the corners of Nanyi's mouth and her face was filled with tears. She looked really miserable. The scene was dead silent. Other than her whimpering cries, there were no other sounds. Everyone was shocked by Rong Xiu's straightforward move. No one expected that Rong Xiu would actually do as he said. He said that he would cut off Nanyi's tongue. Even if Nan Yifan and the rest stopped him, he would still do it. Rong Xiu was a little irritated by her mournful voice. He narrowed his eyes dangerously. If you continue to make noise, I have ways to shut you up forever. Nanyi's voice stopped abruptly. Her blood surged, her chest and abdomen churned, and more blood flowed from the corners of her mouth. However, after being glanced at by Rong Xiu's deep and cold eyes, she didn't dare to make a sound. She had no doubt that Rong Xiu would definitely do this. Yi. Luo Yin walked over quickly. Nanyi looked at him without saying a word, but tears kept falling. Luo Yan's heart ached when he saw her like this. He took out a pill and fed it to her. But Nanyi's mouth was full of blood and she was in so much pain that she couldn't swallow the pill. The veins on Luo Yan's forehead bulged, but in the end he could only endure it. He wanted to take revenge on Rong Xiu. However, this matter wasn't so easy. Not to mention that Rong Xiu's strength had increased a lot. He still had many trump cards that he hadn't revealed yet. It was really difficult to do anything to him. Just the attitude of the family head was too much to think about. Nanyi was his only daughter and he had doted on her for so many years. How could his heart not ache? But, until now, Nan Yifan hadn't done anything to Rong Xiu. Coupled with his abnormal attitude when facing Rong Xiu previously, one couldn't help but think more about it. Nan Yifan would never be so polite to someone for no reason, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would swallow his anger. He seemed to be rather afraid of Rong Xiu. What was he afraid of? Luo Yin didn't know. However, he understood that the things that were involved in this matter had definitely exceeded their expectations. So much so that Nan Yifan could swallow his anger. Besides, even if they disregarded everything and fell out with Rong Xiu, then, what about the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? They were also on Shangguan Yu's side. In other words, all the grievances and pain today, Nanny had to bear it even if she didn't want to. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1720. Boom. Just as the situation reached a stalemate, the sound of an intense energy collision was heard. It was Shangguan Jing and Yu Hongshan fighting again. Yu Hongshan was already at a disadvantage. Now that he saw the Nan family suffer losses again and again, he had become the target of public criticism. He couldn't help but feel angry and anxious. He thought that by relying on Nanyi and the Nan family, he still had some chance of winning today. Who knew that the remaining two parties were even more difficult to deal with? He didn't know what was so powerful about that Rongxiu. But Nan Yifan's attitude was enough to explain many things. Besides, there was also Yizhao. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan clearly wanted to side with Shangguanyu today. Shangguanjing was a Taizu from Shangguanyu, so they would naturally help. Now he was already at the end of his rope. His psychological defense line collapsed, and Yu Hongshan's combat strength declined rapidly. Soon he began to be defeated. Shangguanjing took advantage of the opportunity to pursue him and beat him fiercely. He vented all the grudges of the past 1,000 years. Not long after, Yu Hongshan made a huge mistake, and Shangguanjing seized the opportunity to give him a fatal blow. Bam! Yu Hongshan's translucent body finally exploded with this sound. Vanished into thin air. His soul was destroyed. Phew! Shangguanjing let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that Yu Hongshan had lived for more than 1,000 years in this black wall. But fortunately, all of this was finally over. The trace of unwillingness and anger that had accumulated in the depths of his heart finally dissipated with Yu Hongshan's complete death. For a moment, he was secretly glad that he had followed you here this time. Otherwise, how would he have the chance to settle these old matters? Shangguanjing looked up at Chu Luyue. Now he only hoped that Yu could come out safely. Among those present, only the Nan family was suffering. Nan Yifan closed his eyes. The situation today was too unfavorable for them. They had no chance of winning if they forced it. The only thing they could do was to endure all of this. He walked to Nanny's side. When he saw Nanny's current state, his heart felt like it was being gripped tightly by something and it hurt terribly. However, even he had to admit that Nanny's fate today was, to a large extent, caused by herself. Of all people to offend, why did he have to offend Rongxiu? If she had only angered Rongxiu, he could still fight for her. However, her words had completely offended the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Nan Yifan was filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would never have let her come here. However, it was too late to say anything now. Let's go home. His voice was low and hoarse. Nanny looked at him with empty eyes. Disappointment? No, it was despair. She thought that her father would protect her. But no. Everything that had happened in the past seemed like a joke now. Now that she was being treated like this, he didn't even have the slightest intention of seeking justice for her. How could Nan Yifan not know what she was thinking? But he also had his difficulties. He couldn't possibly let the entire Nan family go against Rongxiu and the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan for her, right? Moreover, she was clearly in the wrong this time. Even if word got out, they would be the ones in the wrong. Under such circumstances, what else could he do? Nan Yifan clenched his fists and his voice hardened. Luo Yin, take her back. Luo Yin closed his eyes and could only agree in the end. However, just as he was about to take Nanny away, Nanny suddenly started shaking her head frantically. Her face was full of rejection. Whoa! She couldn't speak anymore. Every sound was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the hearts of everyone in the Nan family. She wasn't leaving. She definitely wasn't leaving. She wanted to stay here and see what Shangguanyu was up to. Anyway, she was already in this state. What difference did it make whether she left or stayed? Sensing her resentment, Luo Yin hesitated for a moment before turning to look at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, if you want to leave, you can leave directly. I'll stay here and accompany you. Nan Yifan was so angry that he felt suffocated. Was Luo Yin venting his anger on him as well? Was he having a good time? Nan Yuxing's pill of the essence had shattered and he was completely crippled. Nanny's tongue had been cut off and she had become a mute. As her father, wasn't he the one who was the most heartbroken? He suppressed the anger in his heart. Okay. Then we'll wait here together. We'll leave when she's willing to leave. The elders at the side wanted to comfort him, but the atmosphere was too cold and awkward. In the end, they chose to remain silent. No one cared whether they left or stayed. At this moment, Rongxiu Yizhao and the rest's attention was already on Chu Luyue and Dumpling. Everyone had come out and only the two of them were still trapped inside. And for some reason, the black wall had started to become transparent, which made them feel even more uneasy. After a period of time, more than half of the black wall in front of everyone had faded. That strange totem had also revealed its original appearance. Mysterious and unfathomable, overflowing with light, majestic and awe-inspiring. Chu Luyue's position was very subtle. Everyone looked from the outside and saw that she was right in the middle of the totem. She glanced at Nan Yi and retracted her gaze calmly, as if Nan Yi's life and death couldn't affect her at all. She threw away the paper in her hand. Her slender and delicate fingers moved gently, and another transparent paper flew over. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1721. What's that? Elder EU couldn't help but ask softly. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Everyone present was very curious about this question. Although they could see Chu Luiyue, they couldn't see where the paper went after she threw it away or where the new paper came from. The only thing they could see was that Chu Luiyue seemed to be very focused on studying these things. As for what was written on the transparent paper, no one knew. Yi Zhao didn't answer Elder EU's question. He just turned his gaze and glanced at Dumpling. Sensing his gaze, Dumpling opened her mouth and smiled brightly. Thank you, Grandpa Leader. She originally only felt that this place was very strange and was afraid that Ayu would encounter some danger that she couldn't handle. Thus, she tried to send a message for help. She didn't expect them to really come. Although Dumpling looked young, she had been by Chu Luiyue's side for many years and was very mature. It wasn't that she didn't know what it meant for Grandpa Leader to come personally. Thus, she was very touched and grateful. Therefore, she was not stingy with her big smile. Seeing the bright smile on Dumpling's cute little face, Yi Zhao's heart suddenly felt as if it had been hit by something. It was very tender and loving. His expression didn't change much and was still very dignified. Didn't I tell you before that if you encounter any danger, just say it? You're the young master. The clan will naturally do its best to save you. Elder EU stood at the side and glanced at him lightly. TSK. He clearly wanted to take the opportunity to improve his relationship with Dumpling, but he still said so much nonsense. Even if Dumpling wasn't the young master, he had to come personally. Of course, he definitely couldn't say this in front of him. He had to leave some face and dignity for the clan leader, right? Thus, Elder EU took a step forward with a smile and said, Dumpling, don't worry. Grandpa Fifth Elder is waiting for you here. Dumpling nodded vigorously and clenched her little fists. Yes, Grandpa Fifth Elder, wait for me. Elder EU was very satisfied when he saw the smile on her little face and heard her call him Grandpa Fifth Elder. It was worth it. Today's trip was really worth it. Elder EU couldn't help but move closer to Yi Zhao. He chuckled and couldn't hide his pride. Clan leader, I see that Dumpling is very happy. Do you think I'll be able to hug Dumpling when she comes out this time? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. Yi Zhao looked at him coldly. What are you daydreaming about? He hadn't even hugged her yet, and now it was his turn? Elder EU, if you want to hug me, say it yourself. If you don't say it, who will know? You're too embarrassed to say it, but you don't want others to think about it? Domineering. Unreasonable. Elder EU snorted and said, That's right. That might not be a dream. But Patriarch, you always have a straight face. Aren't you being too serious? Which child would like it? As he spoke, he retreated to the side. If I stand here, Dumpling might not even come to hug me. Yi Zhao looked at him again. EU, no one will treat you as a mute if you don't speak. Elder EU trembled. Then he straightened his neck. Who's afraid of who? As long as Dumpling was happy, so what if the Patriarch was unhappy? Inside the wall, Chu Luiyue threw away the paper in her hand again. The sound of the zither rang in her ears. She raised her eyes and looked forward. And, the last three. Digression. What's missing today will be made up for in tomorrow's update. Although it's lying in the draft box, it will still be published tomorrow, Waving my little hands to beg for monthly votes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1722. She had barely managed to memorize half of the entire song. In addition, the more she listened to it, the more pain and torture she felt at the beginning. The current Chu Luiyue could basically listen to the zither music calmly and flip through the zither scores in front of her. From over 10,000 copies to the last 3 copies, no one knew what kind of pain and suffering she had gone through in the process other than herself. But fortunately, all of this was finally coming to an end. The 3 transparent pieces of paper floated quietly in front of her. Chu Luiyue held her breath and watched intently. Then she chose the middle one. The moment she held it in her hand, the transparent paper shone brightly. However, Chu Luiyue was already used to all of this as she calmly looked at it in detail. She was so focused that the onlookers outside couldn't help but quieten down, as if they were afraid of disturbing her. Nan Yifan stared at her for a while, his eyes full of scrutiny and suspicion. wandering back and forth between her and the transparent paper in his hand. He seemed to be suspecting something, but he wasn't sure. After thinking about it, he only felt a headache and had no choice but to rub his temples. Patriarch. A weak and low voice sounded. Nan Yifan turned his head to look, only to find that Elder Wu Peng had silently walked behind him without him noticing. Seeing that it was him, Nan Yifan's expression eased a little. Elder Wu Peng, what's the matter? Elder Wu Peng glanced at Nan Yi and said in a low voice. Patriarch, actually, Second Miss didn't mean to make things turn out like this. He had been with Nan Yifan for many years and could naturally tell that Nan Yifan felt sorry for Nan Yi, but at the same time he also had some resentment. Originally it was a good experience, but in the end it turned out like this. This was something no one wanted to see. Nan Yifan thought that he was going to speak up for Nan Yi and frowned. Elder Wu Peng, since things have come to this, there are some things that really don't need to be said anymore. Patriarch, do you know why Second Miss has been chasing after them? Elder Wu Peng sighed. If it's really because of personal grudges, not to mention you, even I, an eldest young master, would never agree. These words made Nan Yifan's expression change slightly. He was well aware of Elder Wu Peng's character. It was indeed unlikely that he would allow Nan Yi to cause trouble. As for Nan Yuxing, although he was disappointed in his performance today, anyone who had their primordial core shattered and became a cripple wouldn't be able to calm down in a short period of time. So, there's really something else going on? Nan Yifan's expression became much more serious. If you have any difficulties, please tell me, Elder Wu Peng. Elder Wu Peng paused. The thing you asked second young mistress to find seems to be on that Shangguanyu. Nan Yifan's expression suddenly changed. First, he looked around to make sure that everyone's attention was on the Shangguanyu. Then he asked cautiously, really? Elder Wu Peng gently nodded. This old man has used the Great Star Catcher plate to deduce. Second young miss also sensed the aura of that thing on her body. There shouldn't be any mistake. Nan Yifan frowned and fell silent. If that was the case, then it was understandable why Nan Yi and the others had been chasing after Shangguanyu. Why would that thing be on her body? Nan Yifan couldn't figure it out. I remember that you guys seemed to have entered this god-slaying tomb together? Elder Wu Peng nodded as he briefly recounted the events that had transpired. Nan Yifan had mixed feelings. Previously, Nan Yi only said that there was some conflict between the two sides in the god-slaying tomb, but she didn't explain the cause and effect clearly. Now that Elder Wu Peng had explained it, many things could finally be explained. Although it was indeed Nan Yi and the others who had provoked the other party in the beginning. Later on, they had indeed been entangled with Shangguanyu and the others in order to find that thing, and it was precisely because of this that they had been swept into the Black Wall. Some of them had died and some of them had been injured. In that case, it wasn't entirely Nan Yi's fault. So you're saying that they were one step ahead of you and found that thing? Nan Yifan's expression was cold. Elder Wu Peng thought for a moment and shook his head. Actually, I feel that ever since they entered the god-slaying tomb, they didn't have much time to look for this thing, and from the beginning to the end, Shangguanyu didn't seem to know what we were looking for. When she was fighting with Nan Yi at the end, what she said didn't seem to be false. Nan Yifan frowned. You mean? Elder Wu Peng didn't say anything for a moment and looked up. In the transparent space of the wall, the figure behind the totem sat quietly, determined and persistent. She seemed to have entered a meditative state, and no matter what happened outside, it couldn't cause the slightest ripple in her heart. At this moment, there were only a few transparent pieces of paper in her heart and in her eyes. Perhaps that thing has always been with her. Chu Luiyue looked at the zither score in her hand. The light flowing on it transformed into notes that constantly overlapped with the sound of the zither in her mind. However, halfway through, it finally got stuck again. She sighed softly as if she had already expected this result, and didn't show any disappointment. She just threw away the paper in her hand with a calm expression. There were 2 pieces left. She didn't even look at it and directly took the one on the right. Suddenly she paused and looked up slightly. The space she was in was completely divided into 2 halves with her as the center axis. On the left there was a thick darkness. On the right there was a bright light. The people waiting outside were actually there at this time. So they could see her and she could see them. And in the darkness on the left, there was a person and a zither. Senior Ajing. Chu Luiyue turned her face slightly and looked over. Although it was dark, she could still see a blurry figure at the end of the darkness. The sound of the zither stopped. A low and lazy voice sounded, and it seemed to be more provocative than the sound of the zither. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. It's been hard on you. Jing smiled. Oh, why do you say that? Chu Luiyue raised her hand and took the other one. If I'm not wrong, no matter which one I look at first, the result will be the same, right? A faint smile appeared on her lips. Whether these so-called zither scores are real or fake, it's all up to you, isn't it? No matter which one I leave behind in the end, it doesn't matter. Because the real zither score must be on the last one. What he wanted was for her to finish reading all the zither scores. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1723. Chu Luiyue heard her own voice echo. She looked around and saw that there seemed to be a transparent and invisible barrier around her that blocked her voice. Every time she spoke, she would see faint ripples on the barrier around her. Her heart skipped a beat. She guessed that Senior Jing did not want the people outside to hear their conversation and set it up. Jing was silent for a moment after hearing her words, then he laughed softly. With your intelligence, you should have guessed it long ago. Why are you only asking now? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. You must have your reasons for wanting me to finish reading it. Then she would do as she was told. At this moment, the only reason he asked this question was to seek an answer. Jing's chuckle gradually turned into laughter. Ha! I was right about you. In this world, no one is more suitable than you to be the new owner of this Guqin score. For tens of thousands of years, the Guqin score had been divided into 3 parts and scattered around. Apart from this one, which had always been with him, the other 2 were nowhere to be found. He had been waiting for the Guqin score to choose a new owner, but he did not expect that the wait would be so long. The years were long. He had thought that he would not be able to wait any longer. But in the end he did not let him down. Clang. Jing plucked gently and the Guqin sounded again. In that case, I'll help you one last time. Chu Luiyue knew that he was going to help her merge the Guqin score. She immediately restrained her expression and nodded seriously and respectfully. Thank you, Senior Jing. The sound of the Guqin entered her ears. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and looked at the transparent paper in her hand again. She looked at the one on the right first. Chu Luiyue quickly finished reading that one amidst the desolate and austere sound of the Guqin. She calmly threw away that piece of paper and looked at the last one. On the transparent paper, dazzling flowing light shone brightly. Chu Luiyue stared at it and then took a deep breath. This was the real zither score. She focused and began to study it very carefully. The strange thing was that there were no words on this piece of paper, only a colorful halo. But as she looked at it, she inexplicably began to match the sound of the Guqin in her mind. Gradually, Chu Luiyue realized that every note of the tune began to be clearly engraved in her mind. She was pleasantly surprised by this discovery. She had listened to this tune countless times before, but she could not completely memorize it. But now it seemed that she did not need to deliberately think about it. The tune automatically appeared in her mind. More importantly, she could faintly hear that there seemed to be countless minute changes in this melody, as if it had extended to countless possibilities, but she was still able to smoothly accommodate them all. Everything began to flow naturally. Finally, at a certain moment, the tune. Chu Luiyue finally finished reading the last piece. Buzz. A strange ripple suddenly came from Chu Luiyue's dantian. This fluctuation came from the transparent remnant page that was quietly floating in the air. Then, the Guqin score in Chu Luiyue's hand suddenly turned into a ray of light and flew into her body. The damaged part of the original page was slowly recovering. The 2 transparent pages began to connect with each other. Chu Luiyue quickly realized that there was a subtle connection between the 2. This feeling was indescribable with words. It was majestic, vast, and full of life. They were all closely connected to each other. In the unseen world, there seemed to be a distant and boundless sound of the Guqin reverberating in her body. The force in Chu Luiyue's body instantly began to flow rapidly. Then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to crazily surge into her body. Chu Luiyue was shocked and instinctively looked at Jing. Senior Jing, this is... Shu. Jing raised a finger and placed it on his lips. In the darkness, Chu Luiyue could not see his face and expression clearly, but she heard his voice clearly. It was low, lazy, and carried a hint of inattentive tiredness. There is a small crack in the fusion of the 2 Guqin scores. It needs to be repaired with the energy of heaven and earth. Just watch. Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted slightly. There was a small crack, but how could it be repaired with the energy of heaven and earth? Moreover, the amount of energy needed was too shocking. Chu Luiyue suddenly remembered that when the transparent remnant page was in her body, it had turned into a water droplet and acted as her core of essence. Its ability to devour energy was unparalleled. Now that the two pieces had merged into one, it would be even more shocking. Chu Luiyue held her breath. She had never tested how much energy that thing could absorb before, but now it would be even more difficult. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and looked inside herself carefully. The two transparent pages were connected to each other, and the damaged part in the middle was indeed being repaired bit by bit. But it was too slow. At this moment, her body was devouring the energy of heaven and earth around her at the fastest speed. The two thin transparent pages were like a bottomless pit, continuously accepting the energy from the outside, but there was no end in sight. Time passed slowly and Chu Luiyue became more and more shocked. The energy of this Guqin score was already very shocking, but the damaged part was only being repaired a little. The light around her seemed to be gradually brightening. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes and looked around. On her left, the thick black was fading at an alarming speed. The bright light was gradually sprinkling down. It was as if an invisible hand had broken the invisible but real barrier in the middle. The light began to penetrate her left and right sides, and the energy began to merge. The wind suddenly blew. The energy of heaven and earth began to rush toward Chu Luiyue. The crowd outside noticed this scene, but they didn't feel that anything was wrong at first. But as time passed, they gradually realized that Chu Luiyue's body was like a bottomless pit that could easily accommodate all the energy. The abundant and terrifying energy that could cause an ordinary high god to explode and die after devouring all entered her body. Her expression didn't even change at all. Nanny's expression became more and more unsightly, and her nails dug into her palms. How could this be? How could this be? Although she didn't know what Shang Guanyu was doing, she still understood that a normal cultivator's body couldn't withstand so much energy. Even if Shang Guanyu wanted to break through, it would be enough after absorbing so much energy. But it had been so long, so why hadn't Shang Guanyu stopped? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1724. Chu Ning frowned worriedly. Will you, really be alright? Just by standing there, he could already feel the powerful and majestic energy surging towards him, producing an astonishing pressure. It was as if something was pressing down on his chest, making it difficult for him to breathe. He wondered how who was in the center of the energy vortex, would feel. Compared to Chu Ning's worries, Sheng Guanjing and Nan Suhuai were much calmer. Has always known her limits. She won't do anything that will endanger her life. You can rest assured. Nan Suhuai comforted. But in fact he was also very puzzled. Is she planning to continue breaking through? It doesn't seem like it. Although there was a huge gap between a high god and a noble god, there was no detailed classification. Aside from the difference in divine power, there was also a difference in divine body. Therefore there was a huge gap between a high god and a high god. But Sheng Guanyu had just recalled her divine realm and became a high god not long ago. How could she try to break through to a noble god in such a short time? Even if she had the strength now, she wouldn't do it. She had always been smart and knew that breaking through rashly would do more harm than good. Moreover, she hadn't even condensed the divine body. How could she break through to a noble god? Sheng Guanjing looked at her without saying a word. He had watched her grow up. No matter what she did, she must have her own plans. There was no need to worry about others. Nan Suhuai glanced at Rong Xiao and saw that he was as calm as usual. His hanging heart calmed down. He said to Chu Ning, "Don't worry. Yue will come out safe and sound." On the huge wall, with the totem as the center, the blackness had almost completely disappeared and was spreading to the sides. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees and her eyes closed. Her thick and long eyelashes cast a faint shadow on her face. Her side profile was beautiful and serene, but there was a noble aura that looked down on the world. Even if it was just a glance from afar, it still made people involuntarily feel reverence and submission, and they didn't dare to have any other thoughts. The energy between heaven and earth surged, and in the end, it all gathered into her body. That piece of damage was also gradually being repaired. Clang. The sound of the zither echoed in Chu Yue's mind. The two pieces of music finally merged perfectly and became a complete piece. Of course, there were still some damaged marks on one end. What was missing was obviously the third, which was also the last music score. However, 2/3 of the music scores were now gathered in her hands, and they all recognized her as their master. Even she was amazed by the power contained in this treasure. Soon, this much more complete zither score transformed back into a transparent water droplet. Compared to before, this water droplet was clearly a bit bigger. Furthermore, the water droplet was filled with a brilliant light. It was bright but not dazzling. It was extremely beautiful and moved one's mind. Suddenly, Chu Liyue's glabella was boiling hot. Then, the huge totem on the wall suddenly transformed into a stream of light and flew into Chu Liyue's glabella. In an instant, the totem shone brilliantly. An indescribably strong pressure spread out from Chu Liyue's body. Senior Shangguan, that totem, is it the bloodline inheritance of the Shangguan clan? Nan Suhui suddenly asked. Shangguan Jing shook his head. In order to have a totem, one must have an ancestor who had reached the peak. Only such a person would have the power of bloodline, and only then would the descendants be able to inherit it. However, in the Shangguan clan he was a Taizu. Before him, there was no one who was as strong as him. As for why this totem appeared in Chu Liyue's glabella, he really didn't know. Could it be because of some kind of inheritance here? Nan Suhui stroked his beard with uncertainty. Regarding this matter, he would have to personally ask that lass. Nan Yifan slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and gritted his teeth. If he still couldn't figure out what had happened by now, he would have wasted all his years. No matter if it was obtained before or found this time. In short, that thing was indeed in Shangguan Yu's possession. Moreover, it had completely become her possession. The fading color of the wall was enough to explain everything. Nan Yifan was so angry that he couldn't wait to rush forward and take it back. However, there were so many people watching him. If he made a move now, not only would he not be able to take it back, he might not even be able to get away. So, he had to endure it. A rusty aura quickly spread out from Nan Yifan's mouth. He wobbled and almost fell. Elder Wu Peng hurriedly held him up. Family head you. Nan Yifan waved his hand indicating that he was fine. Elder Wu Peng looked at his pale and haggard expression that couldn't hide his resentment. His lips moved, but in the end he didn't say anything. He just sighed silently in his heart. In fact, after looking at this series of events, he already understood that it was clearly impossible for them to get that thing back. As the family head, Nan Yifan had suffered a series of blows today. Elder Wu Peng was actually very surprised that he could hold on until now. Nan Yuxing's pill of origin shattered and he became a cripple. Nan Yi's tongue was cut off in public and she was humiliated. In addition, Elder Bai Tong was sacrificed. No one would be able to bear so many things. Needless to say, Nan Yifan was still enduring until now. He was probably going to suffer internal injuries from holding it in. However, they really couldn't afford to offend the others present. Other than swallowing their anger and silently biting their teeth, there was nothing else they could do. Luo Yin looked at Nan Yi, whose eyes were red and his heart ached. Yi, now that we're done, let's go? The outcome was already decided. If he continued to watch, it would only make him sadder. Besides, you still have to go back and treat your injuries properly. A mocking sneer flashed across Nan Yi's eyes. Treatment? Given her current situation, there was no way to remedy it. She would become a mute for the rest of her life. Then she looked at Shangguan Yu. Her aura was astonishing and she was in high spirits. There wasn't even a trace of blood on her body. The two of them formed a stark contrast. How could Nan Yi stand it? Endless resentment surged in her eyes and she let out an unwilling whimper. Oh. It was so miserable that it made one's heart tremble. Luo Yin frowned. Given Nan Yi's current state, it was useless no matter how he tried to persuade her. It was better to leave this place first. He reached out his hand, intending to forcefully take Nan Yi away. A cold and pleasant voice suddenly sounded from behind. Wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1725. Even though he didn't mention any names, Luo Yin immediately and keenly sensed that this voice was calling them. He paused and turned back. A trace of vigilance and impatience appeared on his face. What else do you want to do? Don't you think you've harmed Yi enough? Chu Liwei raised her brows slightly and laughed softly as if she had heard a joke. Why do you say that, Senior Luo Yin? When did I harm Nan Yi? From the beginning to the end? Weren't you the ones who pursued us relentlessly and wanted to kill us all? They had only carried out a counterattack, so why was the other party so relentless? Could it be that only you are allowed to win and bully others, and that it is a crime for others to resist and defend themselves? Luo Yin was speechless for a moment. He came over halfway and didn't know the cause and effect. After hearing Nan Yi's words, he was certain that everything was the other party's fault. But just now he finally learned the truth from Elder Wu Peng and the others. Of course, he also knew that Nan Yi herself had to bear a large part of the responsibility for this matter. But he had always doted on Nan Yi and would unconsciously speak up for her in his heart. In addition, Nanny's current situation was too miserable. He really couldn't control himself and blamed all his resentment and anger on others. Chu Liyue's gaze landed on Nanny. Nanny seemed to have sensed something and looked over as well. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Liyue asked with a faint smile. "Second Miss Nan, are you done crying?" Nanny suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave and it was bone-chilling. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. "Shangguanyu, it's really scary." Her hysterical wailing stopped abruptly. Facing such a gaze, she couldn't even cry. Shangguanyu nodded in satisfaction. "Looks like you've cried enough." This Nanny was really strange. His tongue had already been cut off by Rong Xiu for sowing discord and distorting the truth. Who would have thought that she was still unrepentant and even dared to cry in front of so many people? "He really doesn't want to take my life." It finally quieted down. Chu Liyue turned around and took a look. It was empty. All the darkness around her had gradually faded away when she had devoured the energy of heaven and earth to repair the music score. When she finished repairing the music score, the last bit of darkness was illuminated by the brilliant light. As for Senior Ajing, he disappeared as well. Chu Liyue looked around. She was in a special space within the wall. The wall had become transparent so the people outside could clearly see her figure, and she could also see everything outside. However, judging from their reactions, they probably didn't see Senior Ajing, let alone know of his existence. Chu Liyue felt somewhat regretful. She knew that Senior Ajing had helped her a lot. In the end, she didn't even have the time to say thank you before they were separated. What a pity. She was silent for a moment, but quickly collected her emotions and turned to look at Dumpling. She waved her hand. "Dumpling. Are you?" Seeing that Chu Liyue had finally finished everything smoothly, Dumpling heaved a sigh of relief. Then she rushed towards her excitedly and threw herself into her arms. She hugged Chu Liyue's neck tightly with both arms and curled up in Chu Liyue's arms, rubbing her cheeks intimately. Are you? Dumpling missed you so much." Chu Liyue's heart warmed and she hugged her even tighter. "I missed you too." For Tuanzi, perhaps only a few days had passed in the meantime. But for her it had been decades. Senior Ajing had said before that she had read faster than expected, so it didn't take her 100 years. However, it was still decades. She didn't feel it before, but now that she was hugging Dumpling's soft little body and listening to her soft and coquettish voice, Chu Liyue felt a long-lost longing in her heart. She weighed Dumpling in her arms and then took a step forward. The moment Chu Liyue walked out of the wall, a breeze blew and rolled up the corner of her clothes. There seemed to be a fluctuation behind her. Her heart skipped a beat and she looked back. The black color that had spread to the edge instantly scattered like thick ink. The stone that had become crystal clear not long ago was quickly dyed black. In less than a quarter of an hour, it returned to its original heavy and solemn appearance. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, no one would have believed that everything had happened here before. She stared at the black stone for a long time and silently said in her heart, "Thank you, Senior Ajing." Although no one answered, she still felt that Senior Ajing should be able to hear her. Everything around her finally returned to normal. Chu Liyue turned around and walked forward. Nanny's body tensed up instantly. She was here. What was she going to do? She was already in such a sorry state. Was she still unwilling to give up? Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Nanny's mind, causing her to feel terrified and nervous. Chu Liyue walked over step by step. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Nanny instinctively grabbed Luo Yan by the side, her face pale. Luo Yan patted her hand gently, then took half a step forward and blocked Nanny with a cold expression. "What else do you want?" Chu Liyue didn't stop in her tracks as if she didn't hear his warning at all. Luo Yan's expression turned even colder. "If you dare to do anything to Yi again, I won't be polite." Before he could finish speaking, Chu Liyue had already walked in front of the two of them and continued walking forward without stopping. They brushed past each other. She didn't even look at Luo Yan and Nanyi. The rest of Luo Yan's words were suddenly stuck in his throat, unable to go up and down. Chu Liyue walked for a while before putting Tuanzi down. Then she solemnly and seriously bowed to Yi Zhao and the other man to thank them. "Thank you, clan leader Yi Zhao and elder Yi Yu, for coming to the rescue." Yi Zhao's expression was indifferent. "Since Dumpling asked for help, we naturally had to come. There's no need to thank us. Besides, we didn't do anything this time." Chu Liyue straightened her body, curved her lips and smiled. "Seniors, you're too polite. If they weren't here, the Nan family would definitely not let this matter rest so easily. She, on the other hand, had brought Dumpling to a false alarm and made them worry for a long time. She gently patted Dumpling's head and urged her softly. "Dumpling, why aren't you thanking the two of them?" Tuanzi nodded hard and then bowed to the two of them in a formal manner. "Thank you, Grandpa Clan Leader. Thank you, Grandpa Fifth Elder." Looking at her cute little face, Yi Zhao's fingers twitched. Why did he feel like pinching her? Unfortunately, he was used to being serious and didn't know what to do. He really couldn't bring himself to do this. At this moment, Elder Yu had already bent his legs slightly and opened his arms magnanimously. He chuckled at Tuanzi and said, "Tuanzi, Tuanzi. Dumpling. Come and let Grandpa Fifth Elder take a good look at you. Are you injured?" Compared to Yi Zhao and the other elders, Elder Yu's attitude toward Chu Luiyue and Dumpling was very good from the start. In addition, he had helped them a lot both openly and secretly, so Chu Luiyue and Dumpling were naturally closer to him. Upon hearing Elder Yu's words, Tuanzi didn't think too much about it and immediately ran over. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of Elder Yu. She lifted her little face and turned left and right, revealing a big smile. "Grandpa Fifth Elder, look. I'm fine." Dumpling was also very grateful for their arrival, so she wasn't stingy with her smile and enthusiasm. Elder Yu's heart was about to melt. So cute. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had never seen someone who could transform into a human at such a young age. Under normal circumstances, the juniors they saw were at least in their teens. But Dumpling looked like she was only 3 or 4 years old now. This was a completely different feeling. Even though they knew that Tuanzi had the purest bloodline and had opened the 4th meridian and was definitely one of the best in the younger generation, looking at her cute and petite appearance, they couldn't help but feel pity for her. They couldn't wait to hold her in their palms and give her all the best things in the world. Finally, Elder Yu couldn't help but reach his hand forward, patting her hair bun tentatively and praising her sincerely. "Dumpling is so awesome." Tuanzi chuckled. Then it rushed forward and hugged Elder Yu's thigh. "Grandpa Fifth Elder is awesome too." She saw it just now. Those arrogant people from the Nan family were so respectful in front of Grandpa Fifth Elder and the rest. Elder Yu. Yi Zhao. Digression. In the blink of an eye, it was the last day of 2019. She still remembered that she was thinking about opening a book at this time last year. A year's time flew by just like that. This year, I'm really grateful for everyone's company and support. Without all of you, there wouldn't be today's February. In the new year, the journey continues. I hope I can still be with all of you. Happy New Year. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1727. Rong Xiu's expression turned cold as he quickly grabbed her hand. The two figures disappeared at the same time. The collapsing void was quickly covered by a thick layer of darkness, completely concealing their tracks. Are you? Everyone present was shocked by this sudden scene, and they all cried out in alarm. However, it happened too quickly. Before they could react, they had already disappeared. Nan Suhui frowned and was about to tear open the space again to follow them. Sheng Guanjing stretched out his hand and stopped him. "It's useless. The void here is shaking. Every space crack will lead to a different direction. Even if we tear open the space at the same place again, we won't be able to reach the same place as them." Sheng Guanjing had been here before and could be considered the person who was most familiar with the world of divine ruins among the people present. If even he said so, then it proved that this method would not work. Then what should we do? Nan Suhuai's face was filled with anxiety. This person had just come out of the strange wall and had not said anything before he fell into the void again. No one knew where he went. The world was so big. How could they find him? Sheng Guanjing also frowned and fell into deep thought. Actually, this is not the first time something like this has happened. 1,000 years ago, I came here with Yu Hongshan. He was the one who fought with me just now. Back then, a conflict broke out between us here. Due to various coincidences, he was sucked into the black wall and could never come out. As for me, I was swallowed by the void. When I came out, I was already in the northern region of the wilderness. You shouldn't be in fatal danger. Besides, Rong Xiu is with her. I'm afraid it will be a little difficult to find them immediately. His words silenced the crowd. The northern region of the wilderness. That was a very dangerous place. It was thousands of miles away from here. But this was not the most important thing. For them, even if it was the northern region of the wilderness or a place more dangerous than that, it was not impossible for them to go there. The most important thing was that they had to determine the location of Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu first. The divine ruins world was vast and boundless. Who knew where they had been sent to this time? Amidst the suffocating silence, a loud cry suddenly rang out. Ayu is missing. Woo woo woo. Ayu. The person crying was Dumpling. Shengguan Jing and the others looked at each other. Everything happened so suddenly that only Rongxiu reacted the fastest and followed him. Dumpling, on the other hand, was nestled in Yi Zhao's arms, so she couldn't catch up with them immediately. As a result, she was left behind. Seeing Dumpling crying, Yi Zhao immediately panicked. He quickly raised his hand to carefully wipe away Dumpling's tears. His palm was thick and rough, even bigger than Dumpling's face. This action was particularly clumsy. Dumpling, don't cry, don't cry. Yi Zhao was also very anxious. When had he ever done such a thing? Usually, the clansmen were all respectful when they saw him. If anyone did anything wrong, Yi Zhao's reprimand was enough to put a lot of pressure on them. In short, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of Yi Zhao. However, Dumpling was different. On one hand, she didn't grow up in Phoenix Mountain, so she had never seen Yi Zhao's dignity and power. On the other hand, she had been with Chu Luiyue for a long time, so her personality had become casual and she wasn't afraid of Yi Zhao's anger at all. If she was afraid, she wouldn't have confronted them head-on in the Phoenix Temple. As a result, Tuanzi burst into tears. Yi Zhao had a headache. Now, not only did he have to carry her, but he also had to coax her. Dumpling's crying made him feel extremely uncomfortable, but he didn't know how to comfort her. Hence, he glared at Elder Yu angrily. What are you looking at? Come over and think of a way to coax her. Elder Yu, who was inexplicably angered, was stunned. You were the one who hugged her when you were hugging her. Now that you're coaxing her, you're thinking of me? However, he couldn't afford to offend either of them. Furthermore, he also felt terrible when he saw Dumpling crying. Elder Yu had no choice but to swallow his words. He pondered for a moment and coaxed, Dumpling, don't cry first. Let's see if we can sense where they are now. If we can find any clues, we can go and look for them directly. After all, there's a contract between them. Hearing this, Dumpling stopped crying. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and nodded while sobbing. Then I'll try. Everyone, including Shengguan Jing, looked over. Obviously, all their hopes were placed on Dumpling. Dumpling closed her red eyes, held her breath, and began to seriously search for traces of Chu Luiyue. Fortunately, they were no longer within the black wall, so the connection between her and Chu Luiyue was not broken. It was just that this connection was really a little illusory and difficult to grasp. After a while, Dumpling opened her eyes and frowned. Seeing her expression, everyone already had an answer in their hearts. However, Elder Yu still asked a question. Dumpling, how is it? Did you find anything? Dumpling shook her head. Ayu seems to still be in the void turbulence. I can't accurately determine her direction and location for the time being. Everyone looked at each other. That's true. If she was really sent from here to somewhere thousands of miles away, it would probably take a long time. Dumpling clenched her small fists. I'll continue to search. I'll definitely find Ayu. As long as Chu Luiyue arrived somewhere, she would be able to find him very quickly. In the face of Tuanzi's decision, no one had any objection. Yi Zhao put Dumpling down so that she could focus on searching for Chu Luiyue's aura. Dumpling sat cross-legged and closed her eyes again. The others present also subconsciously held their breaths and quietened down, patiently waiting for Dumpling's answer. On the other side, Chu Luiyue felt that there was nothing under her feet and her body fell back uncontrollably. Immediately, she felt a broad and warm hand grab her wrist tightly. The surroundings instantly fell into darkness. And she was also pulled back by this hand and fell into a familiar embrace. A faint cold fragrance instantly filled her nose, making Chu Luiyue relax a lot. Rongxiu. Rongxiu responded in a low voice. His voice was exceptionally low as he wrapped one arm around her slender waist and hugged her tightly. Chu Luiyue was surprised for a moment. Rongxiu's movements seemed to be much faster than before, and the aura on his body, she didn't have the time to take a closer look at him just now. Now that she was closer, she realized that he seemed to have changed a little. She raised her head slightly and asked with some uncertainty. How did you catch up? You broke through? Rongxiu lowered his head, gently grabbed her waist and pushed her up. Then he easily found her soft and sweet lips in the darkness. The vague syllables with a smile disappeared between his lips. Chasing you is what I'm best at and most passionate about. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1728. Rong Xiao had originally wanted to stop after tasting her, but her lips were too soft, and her breath was too sweet. He almost couldn't help but linger on. After going back and forth a few times, he heard her slightly hurried panting. Only then did he restrain himself and stop. He tilted his head slightly and rested his chin on her shoulder. His hot breath fell on her slender and delicate neck, causing a slight shudder. The hand that was holding her slender waist seemed to have tightened a lot more than before. His body was tense and he half leaned on her like this. After a while he let out a long sigh and couldn't help but chuckle. You really reap what you sow. The self-control that he was so proud of always crumbled in front of her. Chu Liyue's cheeks were slightly hot. Your Highness Holy Son, your heart is really big. Even at this time you're still thinking about this? Rong Xiao turned his head, and his lips lightly brushed against her cheek. His warm breath fell on her ear, and Chu Liyue could even hear the subtle flow of the surrounding air. Rong Xiao's voice was extremely low and seductive. He said frankly and ambiguously. It's been so long since you went to Phoenix God Mountain. If I said I didn't want to, I would be lying. His voice was a little hoarse and mixed with a scorching breath. It was especially easy to make people blush and their hearts beat faster. However, his tone was so frank and upright, and also carried a little obvious grievance. On the contrary, Chu Liyue didn't know how to respond. She stretched out her finger and tapped on his broad and firm chest, changing the topic. This place is dangerous, your highness should be more careful. Rong Xiao laughed, then straightened up, held her hand and looked around. It was dark all around them, but there was a light golden barrier around the two of them. Rong Xiao had conveniently set it up when the two of them fell here. The violent turbulence around them was isolated, and the two of them could be said to be calm within the boundary. But the most unsettling thing was that they didn't know where they were going. Chu Liyue said, Taizu said before that he was sent directly to the northern territory of the untainted land 1,000 years ago. I wonder, where will we be sent to this time? Rong Xiao smiled. The faint light shone on his face, only revealing his calm and noble demeanor. It's still somewhere in the divine ruins world. His tone was relaxed and carried a hint of indifference. He didn't seem to take this matter to heart. Hearing his tone, Chu Liyue could not help but turn to look at him. That's right. There's something I forgot to ask you. Rong Xiao nodded. Ask away. Chu Liyue pursed his lips slightly. The Nan family's position in the divine ruins world should be higher than the Yuntian Tower, right? But when Nan Yifan saw you, why was he so? She paused for a moment and thought for a long time. She didn't know what words to use to describe it. You want to ask why Nan Yifan is so afraid of me? Rong Xiao answered her with a smile. Chu Liyue nodded. Afraid? This word sounded too straightforward, but it was indeed accurate. Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiao was indeed too strange. After Nan Yi and the others found out about Rong Xiao's identity, they didn't take it to heart. From the beginning to the end, they were all high and mighty, obviously relying on the Nan family's confidence. However, as the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan's expression immediately changed when he saw Rong Xiao. After that, not only did he swallow his anger and apologize, he even endured Rong Xiao cutting Nan Yi's tongue in public. If he wasn't afraid of Rong Xiao, it would be strange. But why? Rong Xiao was the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, and now had great power and a noble status. But in the divine ruins world, Yuntian Tower wasn't the only one. Chu Liyue hadn't heard of this Nan family before, but it was obviously more powerful than Yuntian Tower. Then there must be other more powerful sects that she didn't know about. To be able to make Nan Yifan act like this, Rong Xiao definitely had other trump cards in his hands. Actually, the reason is very simple. I've dealt with him before and he suffered a loss because of me. Moreover, I have something on him, so, when he sees me he naturally has to take the initiative to avoid me. Rong Xiao's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. Chu Liyue was secretly shocked. Who was Nan Yifan? His intelligence, methods, and strength were all top-notch. He actually suffered a loss at the hands of Rong Xiao, and even had something on him in the hands of Rong Xiao. Then, it could only mean that Rong Xiao was too heaven-defying. Chu Liyue had always thought that she was good at tricking people, but at this moment, compared to Rong Xiao, it was still unknown who was stronger and who was weaker. Seeing that Rong Xiao was too lazy to talk about the past, Chu Liyue didn't ask in detail. She could tell that Rong Xiao really didn't take this matter to heart. In other words, he didn't put Nan Yifan in his eyes at all. Chu Liyue had a very subtle feeling in her heart. She had long known that Rong Xiao was powerful, and could even be said to be unfathomable. She had already realized this when they first met. But now, she felt that she had still underestimated him. Suddenly, the barrier beside the two of them shook violently. Chu Liyue's thoughts were interrupted. Rong Xiu raised his gaze slightly and looked forward. It's time to go out. Chu Liyue followed his gaze and saw that the stagnant darkness suddenly fluctuated. Then a bright white light shone out from it. The surrounding turbulence became even more violent. Rong Xiu's barrier also began to shake more. Chu Liyue only felt that the surrounding power began to crazily squeeze towards her. Rong Xiu pulled her into his arms. The next moment the sky brightened up. The two of them flew out in an instant. Bang! As soon as Rong Xiu landed with her in his arms, he heard the sound of something shattering. The dazzling sunlight made it difficult for Chu Liyue to adapt to. She subconsciously narrowed her eyes, then looked down in the direction of the sound. Beneath her feet, a jade plate had been shattered into pieces. It seemed that when they came out just now, Rong Xiu stepped on it and it became like this. Fortunately, Rong Xiu's boots were of excellent quality, so it was not damaged. Chu Liyue breathed a sigh of relief. However, before she could finish her breath, she acutely sensed that the surrounding atmosphere was not right. It was too quiet. The air seemed to have solidified, but there was also a strong murderous intent, silently covering the sky and earth. Chu Liyue raised her head stiffly and looked around. When she saw the scene around her clearly, she suddenly gasped in shock and her pupils shrank. This was, almost at the same time, Dumpling, who was far away in the Godslayer mound, suddenly felt something and opened her eyes. Her eyes were bright, and she excitedly raised her hand and pointed in a certain direction. IU is over there. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1729. The people who had been waiting for a long time also became excited. Sheng Guanjing immediately asked, Dumpling, are you sure? Dumpling nodded seriously. Yes, it's over there. She and IU have a contract and they are very close to each other. There will be no mistake. It's just that. IU seems to be very far from here. Dumpling frowned, feeling a little regretful and worried. Nan Suhuai asked, so she and Rong Xiu are no longer in the God-slaying tomb? Dumpling bit her finger and gave an affirmative answer. Yes. Sheng Guanjing calmed himself down. It's normal. Although the world of divine ruins is vast, it's possible for the void to collapse and the turbulence to send them anywhere. Fortunately, we have Dumpling now. As long as we follow Dumpling's senses, we should be able to find you, and the others soon. Nan Suhuai and Chuning also nodded. A huge rock in their hearts was finally lifted. Nan Suhuai said, there's no time to lose. Let's go over immediately. Of course, Tuanzi agreed wholeheartedly. She wanted to see IU so much now. However, Yizhao and Elder Yu were in a dilemma. Dumpling wanted to follow Nan Suhuai and the others to find Chu Liyue. Of course, this was not a problem. But the key was, should they still follow? Originally, they had rushed over to help Dumpling. Now that Dumpling was not in danger, it was time for them to go back. However, Yizhao and Elder Yu were somewhat reluctant. Especially Yizhao. It was not easy for him to get this opportunity to hug Dumpling. However, before he could properly enjoy it, he had to leave. After this separation, he did not know when they would see each other again. Elder Yu glanced at Yizhao a few times. He had followed Yizhao for more than 100 years and was best at figuring out Yizhao's thoughts. In particular, he knew clearly what Yizhao was thinking now. Because he had the same idea. While they were still in a dilemma, Nan Suhuai asked. Clan leader Yizhao, Elder Yu, what do the two of you plan to do in the future? He was asking them if they were going to stay or leave. Elder Yu felt somewhat regretful. According to the clan leader's usual style, he would never continue to act with them. Even if it was for Dumpling's sake, he had gradually eliminated his grudge against these people. However, as the patriarch of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, his every word and action would attract the attention of countless eyes in the Divine Ruins world. If they left with these people today, who knew what the outside world would say about them in the future? Elder Yu shook his head. I'm afraid we will escort Dumpling to her destination until she meets up with Shang Guanyu. Yizhao suddenly spoke. His voice was low and his expression was solemn. However, the words that came out of his mouth instantly caused Elder Yu to widen his eyes in shock. He looked at Yizhao in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. What did the clan leader say? He wanted to escort Dumpling all the way? Didn't that mean he was going to continue to act with Shang Guanjing and the others? Nan Suhuai and the others were also very surprised. According to their understanding of Yizhao, the latter didn't seem like someone who would be willing to act with them at all. Moreover, his identity was special. If this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a big storm in the entire Divine Ruins world. Needless to say, this was definitely for Dumpling's sake. Nan Su Huai and the others looked at each other, and then at Dumpling in unison. After all, she was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her treatment was indeed different. Moreover, they could also see that Yi Zhao really doted on Dumpling. He was even willing to make these compromises for her. Nan Su Huai nodded. Clan leader Yi Zhao, please. Yi Zhao looked at Dumpling. Dumpling pointed ahead excitedly. Over there. Dead silence. Chu Liyue's eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing on a huge square, and it was right in the middle. On the left and right there were a few rows of people sitting neatly. At a glance, all of them were unfamiliar faces. Most importantly, the aura on these people was extremely powerful. Just by standing there, Chu Liyue felt that it was a little difficult to bear the pressure. The countless pairs of eyes that were filled with scrutiny, suspicion, and hostility made her even more uneasy. These people were not humans. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. She was certain that these people were definitely not humans. The aura on their bodies was somewhat familiar. Chu Liyue slowly clenched her fists. An answer was on the verge of coming out. The Great Phoenix Dragon. It's you guys? Suddenly a familiar voice was heard. Cold, gloomy, and with a trace of undisguised unwillingness and resentment. Chu Liyue frowned slightly and turned her head to look. In the crowd, a gloomy face came into view. It was Mao Yao. He sat in a relatively remote corner of the second row, very inconspicuous. In addition, during this period of time, he had become haggard and thinner, and he no longer had the high-spirited and proud appearance from before. That was why Chu Liyue did not recognize him at first. But at this moment, when she heard this voice and met that gaze, Chu Liyue immediately confirmed his identity. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Chu Liyue's mind. Mao Yao was here and the surrounding people seemed to be great phoenix dragons, then this place was Divine Dragon Island. Rong Xiu's low and calm voice rang in her ears. He laughed as if he found it quite interesting. I didn't expect that this time, we would actually come here. Chu Liyue heard that he was actually in the mood to laugh, and the corners of her eyes twitched violently. Divine Dragon Island. Wasn't that the lair of the Great Phoenix Dragons? They had really barged into a tiger's den. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan was also an ancient divine beast, and they were also extremely arrogant. Although their attitude towards humans was slightly more polite than the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, they had never allowed humans to enter their territory. In all these years, there had never been any news of someone barging into Divine Dragon Island in the Divine Ruins world. Chu Liyue once again carefully examined her surroundings. This solemn and dignified atmosphere, this group of people gathered together, everything was showing that not only had the two of them come to Divine Dragon Island, but it seemed that they had come at a particularly bad time. Senior Mao Yao, how have you been? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly as she greeted him with ease. It was as if the various battles in the past had never existed. When Mao Yao saw the two of them, he was already furious. At this moment, when he saw the smile on Rong Xiu's face, he was even more furious. Good. The guts of these two people were really big. It was fine if they treated him like that before, but now they actually dared to barge into Divine Dragon Island. Everyone stared at Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu curiously. Someone asked, Elder Mao Yao, do you know these two people? Mao Yao was so angry that he laughed and sneered, I know them. Of course I know them. These two people are the famous Holy Son of the Yintian Tower, Rong Xiu, and the one beside him is Shangguan Yu. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1730. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone's expressions changed at the same time. Most of them had heard of Rong Xiu's name before. More importantly, the woman beside him was actually Shangguan Yu. Recently, her name was much more famous than Rong Xiu on Divine Dragon Island. Shangguan Yu? Isn't that the person from Lingxiao College? That's her. I heard that Shangguan Jing is her Taizu. After Shangguan Jing took away our clansman's corpse, it fell into her hands. She was also the one who injured Elder Mao Yao. This seems like her strength is only at the exalted god level? Elder Mao Yao is so powerful. How could he have suffered such a big loss at her hands? Lower your voice. Can't you see that Elder Mao Yao's expression is already very ugly? But I'm also telling the truth. I'm just curious. What's so powerful about this Shangguan Yu? What's so powerful? As she came directly to Divine Dragon Island today. How can an ordinary person have such courage? That's true. But now that she's here, I'm afraid Elder Mao Yao won't let her off so easily, right? Everyone discussed animatedly. Even though they had lowered their voices, everyone present was an expert with extraordinary five senses. How could they not hear it? Mao Yao clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged. These people's words were too unpleasant to hear. If it were in the past, even if they thought so, they would definitely not dare to say it directly in front of him. But it was different now. In this Thousand Summit, he was directly removed from the affairs in charge, and the power in his hands was quickly divided up by the other elders. In addition, after he was injured last time, he had not been able to fully recover. Now his status in the clan was much worse than before. The attitude of these clansmen towards him naturally became disrespectful. Mao Yao could not take it anymore. In the end, he pushed all the blame to the woman not far away. If it were not for her, he would not have been reduced to such a state today. Shangguan should pay back all the torture he had suffered 10 times, 100 times. Seeing the undisguised hatred and resentment in Mao Yao's eyes, Chu Liyue's originally nervous mood inexplicably relaxed a lot. Anyway, what was the use of being nervous now since she had already thoroughly offended the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe? She might as well face it calmly and see what they could do. Thinking of this, the pressure in Chu Liyue's heart lessened. Her red lips slightly. Elder Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, long time no see. I didn't expect you to still remember me. Mao Yao was so angry that he almost choked. What the hell was that? In Shangguan Yu's **T in the end? Elder? Elder Mao Senior's words. He sneered and clenched his teeth. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, carrying deep resentment and hatred. Not only do I remember you, but I also remember everything that you've done to me. In other words, he had not forgotten any of the scores between them. Chu Liyue's smile deepened, as if she did not understand the deeper meaning in his words. Thank you for your concern. You. Mao Yao's face was ashen. He finally could not hold back and suddenly stood up. Shangguan Yu. How dare you? Before Chu Liyue could say anything, she heard a calm and dignified voice from beside her. Mao Yao. Mao Yao's expression changed when he heard this voice. Finally, he gritted his teeth and sat down again. However, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. If eyes could turn into knives, Chu Liyue would have been cut into pieces. Chu Liyue turned her head in surprise. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. His appearance was very ordinary. At a glance, there was nothing special about him. However, he was sitting at the head of the table. His identity was obviously not ordinary. Chu Liyue's heart trembled slightly. This man, just as she was hesitating, Rong Xiu had already taken a step forward, cupped his fists and bowed politely. Clan leader Mao Yang, I've long heard of your name. Meeting you today, you really live up to your reputation. It was indeed him. Chu Liyue knew this name. Ever since Dumpling had broken through to become a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she had been paying close attention to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and read a lot of information about them. In the process, she also learned a lot about the Great Phoenix Dragon. Among them was the current clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon, Mao Yang. Speaking of which, Mao Yang was also an extremely legendary figure. It was rumored that his talent was not high. He was just an ordinary existence in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Then one day, for some unknown reason, his bloodline power suddenly soared, and he became the top genius of the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Since then, his talent and diligence made him more and more outstanding. In the end, he successfully became the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. There was only a difference of a few decades between him and Yi Zhao. To them, this time gap was very small. Therefore, almost everyone, including themselves, regarded each other as their opponents. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts was subtle, so it was inevitable that the two clan leaders would be compared. Unfortunately, Mao Yang and Yi Zhao had never really fought, and the number of times they had met could be counted on one hand. It was difficult for everyone to guess who was the stronger one. After seeing Yi Zhao, Chu Liyue couldn't help but secretly compare the two of them in her heart when she saw Mao Yang. They were indeed very different. Yi Zhao was serious and cold, revealing the pride in his bones. As for Mao Yang, his expression was gentle and he looked much easier to get along with than Yi Zhao. Hearing Rong Xiu's words, he also smiled and said, Everyone says that the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu, is extraordinarily talented and charming. Today I see that you are indeed extraordinary. His words were very polite and his attitude was very calm. However, Chu Luiyue secretly frowned in her heart. Although she couldn't tell exactly what it was, she just felt that there was something wrong with this Mao Yang. After all, he was the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. His status was noble and high, so why did he have to be so polite to them? Moreover, this kind of politeness was different from the respect and fear that Nan Yifan had when facing Rongxiu. It seemed that this was indeed the first time Mao Yang and Rongxiu had met. In that case, his attitude was even more bizarre. This is Sheng Guanyu? Mao Yang's gaze fell on Chu Luiyue. His gaze was sharp and tangible, as if he could see through everything. However, he didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable or offended. Chu Luiyue became more and more vigilant. This Mao Yang is not simple. He is definitely not as gentle as he looks on the surface. However, these thoughts only flashed through her mind quickly, and she didn't show it on her face. Junior Sheng Guanyu greets clan leader Mao Yang. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1731. Chu Luiyue bowed politely. Mao Yang's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he quickly looked away. May I know, why did you suddenly visit today? Mao Yang asked tactfully. Everyone present clearly saw that the void above the square had suddenly swayed and collapsed. Then the two of them had suddenly appeared. One must know that they set up layers of barriers around the Divine Dragon Island. Even their own clansmen couldn't enter and leave at will, let alone humans. However, these two people seemed to have completely ignored those obstacles and directly shattered the void to come here. It was really hard not to be suspicious. It's a long story. Rongxiu smiled, but his expression was still calm. After that, he gave a simple explanation of what had happened in just a few words. Of course, he directly skipped over many of the details. After that, everyone present quieted down with different expressions on their faces. But obviously most of them were still suspicious. Even Mao Yang had a surprised look on his face. So you're saying that you somehow came here from the god-slaying mound? Rongxiu nodded. And I didn't mean to come here. If we offended you, please forgive us, Patriarch Mao Yang. Looking at his incomparably sincere expression, Mao Yang was speechless. He had thought of many possibilities, but this was the only one he didn't think of. This sounded too strange. But if he didn't experience it personally, how could he say such a reason? Moreover, with the strength of these two people, it was impossible for them to quietly break through their defenses and come in directly. In other words, what Rongxiu said was true. Of course, Mao Yang didn't believe all of it, but he also felt that what Rongxiu said should be partly true. Mao Yang fell into silence. It was almost impossible for outsiders to verify these things. Whether it was true or not, it was all up to them. Rongxiu's status was not low, so obviously they couldn't take his life. However, since they had suddenly come here, they had to bear the punishment that they deserved. After a while, Mao Yang said, Actually, we didn't mean to make things difficult for the two of you. It's just that you interrupted our 1,000 peaks and even stepped on the jade disc that we used for testing. I'm afraid this debt will have to be settled properly. 1,000 peaks? Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before he quickly came to his senses. No wonder. She was wondering why so many people were here. It turned out that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race was holding the 1,000 Summit. The so-called 1,000 Summit was actually similar to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestral worship ceremony. Every 100 years, the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe would hold a 1,000 Peaks Summit to test the innate talents of the younger generation of the tribe. This could be considered one of the biggest ceremonies in their clan, and it was incomparably important to them. Now that she and Rongxiu had interrupted them, it was no wonder that they were so angry. This Mao Yang was really good at self-restraint. He was actually able to say these words so calmly. If it was Yizhao, suddenly Chu Luiyue's expression froze. A sense of uneasiness quickly surged into her heart. Since this 1,000 Peak Summit was similar to the ancestral worship ceremony, then outsiders should not be allowed to casually appear here. She and Rongxiu had gotten into big trouble. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would definitely not let this matter go so easily. And that jade disc. Chu Luiyue lowered her head to take another look. Clan leader Mao Yang, this jade disc. Mao Yang said indifferently. Actually, this jade disc isn't considered a top-notch treasure. It's just that our tribe only has this one now. After it's damaged, it's extremely difficult to refine another one that's exactly the same. Chu Luiyue's breathing stagnated. Although Mao Yang's tone was very calm, she could also hear the preciousness of this item. It was the only one. And it was a treasure that was specially used for the 1,000 Peak Summit. And it was crushed by them just like that. If she didn't compensate them properly, she would feel that it wasn't right. However, the two of you didn't do it on purpose. This clan leader, why are you so polite to the two of them? In my opinion, they were clearly doing it on purpose. Mao Yao tried to restrain himself, but in the end he couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up again with a furious expression. He raised his finger and pointed at Chu Liwei, gritting his teeth as he said word by word, especially this Shangguan Yu. They're very sinister and cunning. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? They came directly from the god-slaying tomb thousands of miles away to our divine dragon island? Furthermore, he had coincidentally stepped on the jade disc and shattered it? Everyone nodded in agreement. Although Mao Yao was a little agitated at this moment, what he said was not without reason. This series of events was really too coincidental. It was hard for anyone to believe it. Chu Liyue's lips curled into a cold arc when she heard this. She turned around and stared at Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, you have to have evidence before you speak. Don't you think it's a little too much for you to accuse us without any evidence? If you insist on what you said just now, then do I have reason to suspect that you're abusing your position to avenge a personal grudge? Just because I won the bet and caused you to be heavily injured, you hold a grudge against me and want to take this opportunity to slander us? Mao Yang's face turned pale. You. What a glib tongue. When he first met this Shangguan Yu, he already knew how powerful she was. However, that was when he was at Lingxiao College. Now that she was on Divine Dragon Island, their territory, she was still as arrogant as ever. This was ridiculous. Ridiculous. Mao Yao's chest heaved violently. His hand that was pointing at Chu Liyue trembled slightly. Then he waved his sleeves fiercely. Then explain yourself. What's going on? If you can give us an explanation and show us evidence, we'll believe you. Otherwise, you're doing this on purpose. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes and felt a little irritated. She also did not expect that she would actually be sent to this Divine Dragon Island. Did they think she wanted to come? She couldn't wait to cut off all contact with the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. However, it seemed that this had become an extravagant hope. Mao Yao's words are not without reason. In the silence, Mao Yang spoke again. His expression was still gentle, and there was nothing strange about it. His words, however, gradually became sharper. After all, the Thousand Summit is the grandest event of our clan. Because of this, the entire clan had been working tirelessly so that the 1,000-year summit could be held smoothly. But now, everything has become an illusion. Even if the two of you really didn't mean it, you're not completely without responsibility, right? Of course. Rong Xiu replied calmly. He raised his chin slightly and his jawline was smooth. There was a smile at the corner of his lips, but there was calmness between his brows. He was just standing there, but his entire body exuded an indescribable noble aura, making people subconsciously look up and submit to him. If we're in the wrong, we'll take responsibility and never shirk responsibility. Digression, Happy Origin Core. Happy first anniversary, Godly Doctor. I hope that everyone will be healthy and happy in the new year. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1732. As soon as he finished speaking, Mao Yao sneered. Bear the responsibility alone? With just you two? What big words. Let's not talk about anything else, just that jade disc alone. Can you compensate us with an identical one? How are you going to bear the responsibility of delaying the Thousand Peaks Summit? Rong Xiu glanced at him, the smile on his lips fading a little. I, Rong Xiu, have always done what I say. There's no need for others to worry about this. Mao Yao's heart felt stifled and his anger burned even more. This Rong Xiu was not someone to be trifled with. The two of them together could simply infuriate people to death. Mao Yang gave Mao Yao a look. Mao Yao, don't be agitated. Maybe they really have a way. Mao Yao did not dare to disobey his words. He could only snort coldly and swallow the rest of his words. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Liyue, his eyes sweeping across the two of them. Actually, we don't want to make a big deal out of this matter. After all, it won't be good for either of us. How about this? If you have a way to repair this jade disc within an hour, we'll forget about the broken jade disc. How about it? As soon as he finished speaking, the huge square became even quieter. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two people in the square. Good wife, suspicion, ridicule. Everyone had different expressions, but in the end they all had the attitude of watching a joke. Because they all knew very well, in this world there was absolutely no one who could complete this task within an hour. Even the top craftsmen of the human race could not do it. Let alone these two people? Is Patriarch Mao Yang's words true? Rong Xiu seemed to be unaware of the surrounding gazes as he asked faintly. Mao Yang nodded. Of course. In front of so many people, every word he said was carefully considered. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. Good. Since that's the case then, I'll have to ask you and everyone else to wait for an hour for now. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. What did Rong Xiu mean by this? Could it be that he could really restore the jade disc to its original state within an hour? Where did his confidence come from? Chu Luiyue stepped forward and held his hand. Rong Xiu turned around and looked at her with a smile. Their eyes met. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly calmed down. Rong Xiu could do it. Even if no one believed it, she believed it. Rong Xiu indeed had such an ability. Then Rong Xiu walked to the side and picked up the broken plate. You, lend me something. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Rong Xiu said, the corpse of the great phoenix dragon. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. What did Rong Xiu want to do with this thing? Her eyes unconsciously fell on the jade plate that had shattered into several pieces, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. This was Divine Dragon Island. It was one thing for them to suddenly appear here, but if they took out the corpse in front of so many people, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? However, looking at Rong Xiu's calm and composed appearance, Chu Luiyue only moved her lips, but in the end she nodded. With a flick of her wrist, a stream of light flashed. Then a long skeleton appeared in Chu Luiyue's hand. The skeleton was translucent and glowed with a jade-like luster. However, the moment this thing appeared, the entire square was in an uproar. They were all great phoenix dragons, so they were naturally familiar with the aura of this skeleton. Shangguan Yu? How dare you? Mao Yao's eyes widened in anger as he reprimanded angrily. Even Mao Yang's eyes, which had always been gentle, turned cold at this time. Shangguan Yu, Rong Xiu, what are you trying to do? His voice was low and dignified, and every word fell into the ears like a clap of thunder. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled, and the force in her body instantly began to surge. Rong Xiu held her hand. A gentle and majestic aura flowed into her body, quickly calming the force in her body. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. Although her strength had improved, she was still a high god. Facing a top expert like Mao Yang, she was naturally no match for him. Rong Xiu took the corpse in his hand, then raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. There was a faint smile on his noble and devilish face, and his voice was lazy and carried a hint of indifference. Clan leader Mao Yang, why are you so nervous? I'm just borrowing this corpse to repair the jade disc. He didn't seem to care at all, but every word he said struck at the heart of Mao Yang and the others. Of course, they knew that Shangguan Yu had the corpse of one of their clansmen with her. Moreover, she had used this corpse to reconstruct the physical body of her contracted divine beast. If not for this, Mao Yao would not have barged into Lingxiao College and questioned her. Unfortunately, the outcome of that incident was not very good. Mao Yao lost the bet, and at the same time he lost the right to continue asking for the corpse. This was a large part of the reason why the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan's attitude towards Mao Yao had changed. If the corpse was not taken out, it would be fine. They could still put on a show of politeness. But now the corpse was right in front of them. How could they tolerate this? Mao Yang was secretly shocked when he saw that Rong Xiu easily neutralized his coercion. He did not use his full strength just now. He only wanted to put some pressure on them, but he still used 50% of his strength. An ordinary high god expert would definitely not be able to withstand it. However, this did not seem to cause any trouble for Rong Xiu at all. Rong Xiu's strength seemed to be stronger than the rumors. Mao Yang said coldly. But this is the corpse of one of our clansmen. How can you deal with it so casually? This was a slap to the Great Phoenix Dragon clan's face in public. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Clan leader Mao Yang, although this corpse does belong to a senior of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, it's already mine. It's not up to others to decide what I want to do with it, right? This was something he had told Elder Mao Yao back then. Elder Mao Yao, don't you think so? Mao Yao, who was still burning with anger, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat when he heard this. At this moment, he clearly felt countless gazes filled with reproach and resentment fall on him. Mao Yao stammered and tried to appear fierce. What nonsense are you talking about? When did we say that in the bet? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. It seems that you're really forgetful. At that time, we clearly agreed that after I won the bet, this corpse would belong to me, and the Great Phoenix Dragon clan would not pursue it anymore. This naturally means that you no longer have any right to interfere with this matter. There are many witnesses that day. Elder Mao Yao, do you want me to invite a few of them over? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1733. Mao Yao was speechless. Although Chu Liyue's words were unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Since she had won the bet that day, the skeleton belonged to her. Naturally, it was up to her to decide how to deal with it. Even if it was the skeleton of their great Phoenix Dragon clan, they still had no right to interfere. At the end of the day, the responsibility for this matter still fell on his head. Whispers came from the surroundings. Elder Mao Yao actually has the nerve to stand up and speak. If he wasn't too incompetent that day and lost the bet, why would we be suffering Shangguan Yu's anger for no reason? That's right. Because of a personal mistake, the skeleton of a clansman fell into the hands of others and can't be recovered. This is a big mistake. However, Elder Mao Yao hasn't been punished yet. I really don't know what the clan leader is thinking. Why not? Didn't you see that the clan leader didn't let Elder Mao Yao participate in the Thousand Summit this time? You should know that Elder Mao Yao was an important figure in the previous Thousand Peaks. How can this be? In all these years, there has never been a case where a clansman's skeleton has fallen outside and we have no right to recover it. If not for Elder Mao Yao's negligence this time, we wouldn't have to be so sullen. If I were him, I wouldn't have the face to come to the Thousand Summit today. All kinds of discussions entered Mao Yao's ears one after another, causing his face to turn green and extremely embarrassed. He wished he could find a hole to hide in. He knew that this matter would have a big impact on him, but he wouldn't say it out loud. Even the clan leader Mao Yang didn't reprimand him harshly. He just quietly distributed the power in his hands. Although Mao Yao felt terrible, he knew that this was the last bit of face left for him. As time passed, this matter would naturally fade away. However, he didn't expect Shangguan Yu and Rong Xiu to come. Furthermore, he had taken out the skeleton right in front of them. Wasn't this exposing his background in front of everyone? When these clansmen saw the skeleton, they clearly didn't intend to continue enduring. Mao Yao didn't need to think to know that his days in the clan would be even more difficult. And if Rong Xiu did something to the skeleton, Mao Yao felt that he would become the sinner of the entire race. He almost couldn't catch his breath. His body swayed and his face was extremely pale. Chu Liyue asked with concern. Elder Mao Yao, your complexion doesn't look too good. Could it be that you haven't fully recovered from your previous injuries? As she spoke, she frowned slightly and revealed a look of confusion. That shouldn't be the case. I was quite restrained back then. Mao Yao's chest tightened and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Restrain? What did she mean by that? Could it be that she had been merciful to him back then? What would everyone think if they heard this? You. Miao Yao was infuriated. The Shangguan Yu is clearly doing this on purpose. Chu Liyue's smile was gentle and sincere. Do you want to rest first? I see that Patriarch Mao Yang and the others are all here. Even if you leave for a while, it won't have much of an impact, right? Mao Yao's vision turned black, and his body began to tremble. Mao Yang frowned. Mao Yao's appearance was simply too embarrassing. If it weren't for his seniority and his contributions to the clan, he would have been severely held accountable for the skeleton's incident this time. He originally thought that after experiencing this setback, Mao Yao would restrain himself a little. He didn't expect that not only did he not improve at all, he even became even more impatient. Mao Yang lowered his eyes, hiding the cold light in his eyes. Patriarch Mao Yang, don't worry. I want to use these bones to repair the jade disc, but I have no intention of destroying it. Rong Xiu said with a faint smile. This was the Divine Dragon Island, and he wouldn't go so far as to completely offend the great Phoenix Dragon clan here. Hearing this, Mao Yang's tensed face finally relaxed a little. He stared at Rong Xiu for a while and finally nodded, then please. Within the ruins of God, the originally gloomy and oppressive pressure seemed to have lessened by quite a bit. Dumpling and the rest headed outside at an extremely fast speed. Even the weakest, Chu Ning, could barely keep up with the rest after borrowing Shangguan Jing's divine artifact. Not long after, they arrived at the border of the ruins of God and stood in front of the Scarlet Soul Forest again. With their previous experience and the fact that there were no outsiders to disturb them, they passed through very smoothly this time. In the evening, the group walked out of the Scarlet Soul Forest and completely left the ruins of God. When they took the last step, Shangguan Jing couldn't help but look back. It was already evening, and the afterglow of the setting sun covered the entire Scarlet Soul Forest with a faint layer of golden light. Black trees stood in the forest and the dark red leaves swayed in the wind. He had never thought that he would actually come here again and completely resolve the grudge between him and Yu Hongshan. He wondered where Yu was now and whether she was safe. At that thought, he retracted his gaze and looked at Dumpling. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else present was also waiting for Dumpling. Out of all of them, she was the only one who could lead them to Rongxiu and his wife. Dumpling crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand, deep in thought. After a while, she raised her chubby little hand and pointed in a certain direction. Over there. Without hesitation, they immediately followed Tuanzi and ran forward. Time passed slowly and it seemed to be especially unbearable. But fortunately, Dumpling and Chu Luiyue had always been sensing each other. This also proved that at the very least Chu Luiyue should still be safe at this time. And the closer they got, the stronger Dumpling's sensing ability became. The distance between the two parties was obviously shrinking. This made everyone feel more at ease. However, gradually Yi Zhao and Elder Yu both felt that something was amiss. Elder Yu lowered his head to look. At this moment they were passing by a wasteland. The terrain here was a little special. On the yellow wasteland there were ravines crisscrossing. Looking down from the sky, these ravines of varying depths stretched across the boundless wasteland, grand and desolate. This place, Elder Yu finally couldn't help but move to Yi Zhao's side and whisper. Clan leader, don't you think this place seems a little strange? Ordinary wastelands don't have such scenery. In his impression, there seemed to be only one place in the Divine Ruins world that looked like this. Yi Zhao seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and nodded affirmatively. You're right. This is indeed the 13 slopes. Although Elder Yu had already expected this, he was still shocked when he heard such an affirmative answer. The so-called 13 slopes referred to this wasteland. It was said that 10,000 years ago, 13 ancestors of the great phoenix dragon had passed away here together. After they died, the energy of heaven and earth here shook, causing this wasteland to become what it was today. Therefore the descendants called it the 13 slopes. But the key point was, this was the territory of the great phoenix dragon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Although she hadn't spent a lot of time with Grandpa Patriarch and Grandpa Fifth Elder, she could feel that they were genuinely good to her. Now that they were suddenly separated, she naturally felt a little upset. She scratched her hair bun. When Dumpling finds Ayu, I'll go back to visit you and Grandpa Fifth Elder. Yi Zhao looked at her sincere and clean big eyes, as well as her solemn vow, and his heart warmed. Okay. Then Grandpa Patriarch will wait for you. Elder Yu was so touched that tears welled up in his eyes. He hurriedly said, Me too, me too. Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely wait for you. If you want to see Grandpa Fifth Elder, just send a message over. No matter where Dumpling is, Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely be at your beck and call. His words finally made Dumpling burst with joy, and a bright smile bloomed on her face again. It's a deal. After that, Yi Zhao and Elder Yu coaxed Dumpling for a while more before they really bade farewell and watched Dumpling and the others leave. Looking at Dumpling's gradually disappearing figure, Elder Yu couldn't help but ask, Patriarch, can you really be at ease? After all, Dumpling is the young lord. Once she enters Divine Dragon Island, her aura will definitely be detected. What if those people from Divine Dragon Island make things difficult for Dumpling? Yi Zhao's face was expressionless. We have to be at ease even if we can't. If we really go, things will only become more troublesome. Therefore they could only make such a choice. As long as Dumpling goes, they will definitely make things difficult for her. Fortunately, Dumpling is still young and she has a contractual relationship with Shangguanyu. If she wants to go to Shanghaiyu, there is no better reason than that. Even if they want to do something to Dumpling, they have to think of a suitable reason to do so. Originally, they had been brooding over the fact that Dumpling had a contractual relationship with Shangguanyu. However, from the looks of it today, it wasn't all bad. Elder Yu's heart finally calmed down a little. Now, we can only hope that everything goes well for Dumpling and the others. Yi Zhao was silent for a moment before he spoke again. That Rongxiu. Do you know what his background is? Elder Yu didn't expect him to suddenly bring this up. After being stunned for a moment, he said, Don't you already know this? He is the saint of Yintian Tower. Yi Zhao shook his head. What I mean is, other identities. Elder Yu suddenly thought of something. Are you suspicious of Rongxiu because of Nan Yifan's reaction earlier? Yi Zhao nodded. There was nothing to deny about this. He did feel that Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rongxiu was very strange. The Nan family's power was stronger than Yintian Tower. As the head of the family, Nan Yifan had no reason to be so afraid of Rong Xiu. I really don't know. Rong Xiu has been famous in Yuntian Tower for the past few years, but I don't think I've heard that he has any other background other than being the saint of Yuntian Tower. Why don't I go back and look into it? Elder Yu asked tentatively. Yi Zhao was about to nod when he suddenly paused as if he was hesitating about something. After pondering for a long time, he waved his hand. Forget it. Since he didn't say anything, we don't have to deliberately inquire. These things will naturally be known when it's time to know. He took one last look in the direction where Dumpling and the others left. Those figures had completely disappeared from his sight. A breeze blew, fluttering the corners of the two's clothes. Yi Zhao lowered his eyes, hiding the emotions in his eyes, and turned around. It's time for us to go back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1735. Divine Dragon Island. The square in front of the Great Void Temple was completely silent. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two figures standing in the middle. Jealousy, suspicion, indifference. Even without looking up, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the hostility in the eyes of the surrounding people. She lifted her eyes slightly and looked at Rong Xiu in front of her. He was sitting cross-legged with a calm expression. It was as if the gazes of the surrounding people could not affect him at all. The broken jade plate was placed in front of him. As for his hand, it was holding onto the skeleton. He waved his wrist gently and the skeleton flew up lightly and floated quietly in front of him. Then, a cluster of golden flames suddenly surged out from Rong Xiu's hand. Boom! The flames were bright and scorching, jumping around happily like fairies. Rong Xiu's mind moved and the cluster of flames flew out from his hand and landed on one end of the skeleton. Seeing this scene, the crowd could not help but become restless. The corners of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched violently. Burning the skeleton of their clansman in front of the great phoenix dragon. Only Rong Xiu would do such a thing. Mao Yang's dignified eyes quickly scanned the crowd. The restless voices quickly calmed down. However, those pairs of eyes that were surging with waves clearly indicated that their hearts were far from as calm as they appeared on the surface. Chu Liyue's brows twitched slightly and she quickly glanced at Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table. She had long heard that Mao Yang was highly respected in the clan. Today she saw that he was indeed worthy of his reputation. Although he looked kind and polite, if he did not use ruthless methods, he would not have been able to sit firmly in the position of clan leader. Almost at the instant Chu Luiyue looked over, Mao Yang was acutely aware of this point and directly looked over. The two of them looked at each other. In the silence, there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Chu Luiyue's lips curled slightly and revealed a polite smile. Then she calmly looked away. After a short while, the feeling of having a knife on his back disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief and fixed her eyes on Rong Xiu. The cluster of golden flames burned from one end of the skeleton and gradually spread to the other end. Wherever it passed, the skeleton seemed to become more sparkling and translucent. She could vaguely see a small amount of transparent liquid flowing slowly inside. A majestic aura spread out from the skeleton. A trace of surprise flashed across Chu Liyue's heart. Although she had only used 2 wing bones when she reconstructed Zichen's body, she had basically extracted all the bloodline energy in the skeleton. She had originally thought that she had extracted the purest power of the skeleton's bloodline. But now, it seemed that there was still a remnant of the bloodline power of the skeleton. More importantly, Rong Xiu had so easily dug out the power hidden in every inch of the skeleton. This was something that even Chu Luiyue could not do. Chu Luiyue stared at the burning golden flames. She had always known that the golden flames on Rong Xiu's body were not ordinary, but she had never thought about it carefully before. But now she suddenly felt a little curious, because she realized that the power of the flames did not seem to be inferior to hers. After all, she could summon 2 flames. One was the scarlet gold flame of the scarlet gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was the transparent karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron. These 2 flames were extraordinarily powerful, not to mention that they were supported by the power of the transparent water droplet in her body. No, it should be called a zither score. After experiencing those things in the god-slaying mound, she realized that this thing on her was a precious treasure. The golden flames on Rong Xiu's body were not inferior in comparison. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about these questions, the golden flames had already burned to the other end of the skeleton. Rong Xiu raised his hand, and the flames silently separated from the skeleton. At the same time, the transparent liquid in the skeleton slowly seeped out and condensed into a ball the size of a longan. This ball was surrounded and roasted by the golden flames. Gradually, a shadow seemed to emerge from it. Chu Luiyue stood closer so she could see it more clearly than the others. At first, the shadow was just a blurry ball, but gradually as time passed and the golden flames condensed, the shadow became clearer and clearer. Finally, at a certain moment, the shadow revealed its true appearance. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. It was actually a dragon. A great phoenix dragon. Although it was very small, Chu Luiyue could tell at first glance that it was indeed a great phoenix dragon. A deep dragon roar resounded through the world. The pressure was heavy, covering the sky and the earth. Chu Luiyue was shocked. The onlookers were also shocked. They did not expect Rong Xiu to be able to refine the remaining bloodline power. Then Rong Xiu flicked his finger. The golden flames wrapped around it and quickly pounced on the broken jade disc. The flames were bright, blazing. It instantly surrounded the jade disc. Almost at the same time, the great phoenix dragon's shadow in the water droplet began to move at an even faster speed. Then, bang! A slight cracking sound could be heard. The water droplet turned into countless tiny water droplets and splashed on the jade disc. It was as if there was an invisible thread that began to string the broken pieces together perfectly. Under the strong and shocking dragon's might, the cracks on the jade disc began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The golden flames burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, Chu Luiyue saw that the cracks on the jade disc were disappearing. Not long after, Rong Xiu's bony finger tapped lightly. The golden flames flew back instantly. A jade disc floated quietly in the air. All the cracks on it had disappeared. It was as clean as new and flawless. Rong Xiu stood up and kept the jade disc in his hand. Then he raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. Clan leader Mao Yang, I did not disappoint you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1736. The entire place was dead silent. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the stiff and cold atmosphere. Impossible. There must be something fishy going on. Rong Xiu glanced sideways with an indifferent expression. Elder Mao Yao, you're not in good health, so you shouldn't be so agitated, right? If you accidentally faint, whose fault is it? Mao Yao was furious. He finally saw through it. These two people were sharper than the other. If he spoke a few more words with them, he might die from anger. Mao Yao took a deep breath and finally realized something. He was no match for the two of them in a war of words. Thus, he stopped arguing with Rong Xiu and turned to look at Mao Yang. Patriarch. Others may not know, but you know it best. That jade disc is a treasure of our clan. Once it shatters, it can't be repaired within an hour. Rong Xiu must have used some kind of trick to make it look as good as new on the surface. You mustn't be fooled by him. Chu Luiyue said with a smile that was not a smile. Oh, Elder Mao Yao, you mean? Patriarch Mao Yang raised this condition to deliberately make things difficult for us? Mao Yao was speechless. Enough. Mao Yang stood up and his voice was finally tinged with anger. He frowned and looked at Mao Yao. Whether it's true or not, I will personally check it. Elder Mao Yao doesn't need to worry about it. He really didn't know what was wrong with Mao Yao. Ever since the failure in Shangguanyu, he seemed to have become impulsive and irritable. He couldn't do anything right, but he was good at spoiling things. Mao Yao also felt as if he was possessed. It was as if as long as those two were involved, he would become irrational and even make mistakes. His situation in the clan was already difficult enough. If this continued, it would be a problem if he could continue to stay in the clan. His face was pale and he swallowed the rest of his words with an embarrassed expression. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu. I wonder if you can let me take a look at this thing? Rong Xiu nodded. Of course. As he spoke, he casually tossed it into the air. The jade disc flew towards Mao Yang. Mao Yang took the item and glanced at Rong Xiu. The young man was dressed in a snow-white robe. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, and his expression was calm and composed. He seemed to be very confident. Mao Yang frowned, and then he looked at the jade disc in his hand and carefully observed it. This was a treasure of their clan. As the clan leader, he was naturally the most familiar with it. The crowd quieted down again. Everyone focused their attention and looked at Mao Yang, waiting for his conclusion. In fact, most people didn't quite believe it. Their thoughts were similar to Mao Yao's. They all felt that Rong Xiu must have used some special method to make it look exactly the same from the outside. Rong Xiu did not seem to care about this. He handed the skeleton to Chu Luiyue and said with a smile, "Many thanks you." Chu Luiyue took the item and smiled. Her eyes flickered, and there was a fine but bright light in her eyes. In fact, other than providing this skeleton, she did not help him with anything else. In the end, it was Rongxiu himself who was powerful enough. If it was someone else, it would be difficult to do so. After a while, Mao Yang raised his head and looked at Rongxiu with a complicated gaze. Everyone's hearts were also in suspense. Clan leader's expression is not very good. I think there's something wrong with that thing. It's all expected. From the beginning to the end, Rongxiu only used half the time. It's impossible to completely repair the jade disc in such a short time. I want to see if they can still be so calm later. Low murmurs of discussion could be heard from both sides. Rongxiu did not seem to hear it. With a smile on his lips, he looked at Mao Yang and asked, "Clan leader Mao Yang, how is it?" His voice was low and pleasing to the ear, and it carried a calming force. Mao Yang was silent for a while before he said, "This jade disc has indeed been restored to its original state." As soon as his words fell, everyone was shocked. The huge square was instantly dead silent. Almost everyone's expression froze on their faces. For a moment they did not know how to react. Clan leader said, "It had indeed been restored to its original state?" Didn't that mean that Rongxiu really only used half the time to complete their request? No. How did he do it? Rongxiu's smile deepened. It's indeed not easy to do this. But fortunately you has the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. With the help of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power, repairing the jade disc will naturally be much easier. This jade disc belonged to them in the first place. What else was more suitable than their own bloodline power to do this? All in all I did was transfer the bloodline power in the skeleton to the jade disc. This way, it shouldn't be considered an offense to clan leader Mao Yang, right? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. From the beginning he had said that he wouldn't damage the skeleton at all. Now he could be considered to have done what he said. His words caused everyone to fall silent. These words didn't seem to be wrong. Originally they thought that if Rongxiu really did something they could use this against him. However, what he did this time was indeed extremely benevolent, and there was no place to attack. This made people unable to find a reason to scold him even if they wanted to. Mao Yang was actually holding back a belly full of anger. Although the jade disc had been perfectly restored, he had only wanted to take this opportunity to make things difficult for the two of them. Who would have thought that Rongxiu would actually do it? Mao Yang only felt as if he had punched cotton, and his entire person was extremely sullen. However, his self-restraint was extremely good. Even if his emotions were surging in his heart, his face was still expressionless. He sighed softly. The holy son of the Yuntian Tower is indeed as powerful as the rumors say. No, it should be said that the outside world still underestimated you. Although this child was young, his thoughts were deep. They had been here for so long, but he couldn't guess Rongxiu's thoughts at all. Moreover, he faintly felt that Rongxiu should have other trump cards. This person. I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. Rongxiu gladly accepted Mao Yang's insincere praise. You flatter me. In fact, I just wanted to turn today's matter into a small matter, and a small matter into nothing. We damaged this jade disc, so it's only right to repair it and compensate. He paused. Now that the jade disc has been restored and we have already apologized before, then you and I can leave now, right? Mao Yang narrowed his eyes. The two of them looked at each other. In an instant sparks flew. The two sides' strength clashed silently. Mao Yang handed the jade disc to an elder next to him and said slowly, "I'm afraid this will be a little difficult." Rongxiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile on the corner of his lips was stained with a layer of frost. Digression. The Xiaoxiang coin's reward for the first day of New Year's Day has been issued. The list of December's comments and the 3 days of New Year's Day's comments will be announced after the event. Speaking of which, Dumpling and DeBeo are so good looking, I want to flood the surrounding comments section. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1737. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Rongxiu asked faintly. Mao Yang had one hand behind his back, and his expression was still calm and gentle. However, at this moment, in the eyes of Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu, his face became stiff and cold. Don't misunderstand, we definitely didn't mean to cause trouble for you. We're all very happy and gratified that the jade disc has been repaired. It's just that, the matter isn't over yet, so I'm afraid we can't let you two leave for the time being. He raised his chin slightly, and there was a hint of authority in his voice. Other than this jade disc, it's also true that the two of you appeared out of nowhere and interrupted our 1,000 peaks. More importantly, for 10,000 years, no human has ever taken a step into Divine Dragon Island. However, not only did the two of you come today, but you also barged into the Great Void Temple. This debt. I'm afraid we still have to settle it properly. Chu Liyue suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Mao Yang's eyes darkened. Shengguanyu, what are you laughing at? Halfway through his words, he was suddenly interrupted. He hadn't had such an experience for many years. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Liyue's laughter made him feel very unhappy. Chu Liyue blinked. No, I was just thinking that since you didn't want to let us leave so easily from the beginning, then there's no need to say these complicated and lengthy pleasantries, is there? No matter whether Rong Xiu succeeded or failed, they wouldn't let it go. After all, they didn't plan to let Rong Xiu do this from the beginning. Unfortunately, they underestimated Rong Xiu. Therefore, at this time they could only use such words to forcefully stop them. Mao Yang didn't expect Chu Liyue to be so straightforward, and finally, his face couldn't hold it anymore. He stared at Chu Liyue for a while and then suddenly laughed, but there was no smile on his face. You're in the wrong in this matter. Why now, don't we even have the right to pursue responsibility? Chu Liyue's smile didn't change and her eyes curved. Of course. What I mean is, if you have any other conditions, just say them all. Our time is precious, so let's get straight to the point. Mao Yang's hands in his sleeves. He finally realized that Shengguanyu didn't play by the rules. Those things were indeed of no use to her. Rong Xiu, who was at the side, was clearly on her side. These two people. It's really not easy. After thinking of this point, Mao Yang became much more. He pondered for a moment and said, let's not beats. If you want to leave this place, it's simple. Erase all memories related to this place. Anything related to the Divine Dragon Island must not be taken out by them. Rong Xiu squinted his eyes. A cold smile appeared on Chu Liyue's lips. She knew it wouldn't be over so easily. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. These memories belong to us. How do you want to erase them? Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. We have our own ways. You just have to do as we say. Chu Liyue sneered in her heart. It's easy to say. Isn't this the same as handing our lives over to them? Only a fool would agree. Rong Xiu said, Clan leader Mao Yang, we can't agree to your request. Mao Yang had expected such an answer from the two of them. His expression didn't change and his attitude was firm. Actually, we don't want to do this, but there's really no other way. It's fine if you don't agree. When you think it through and are willing to agree to this condition, we'll let you go. Rong Xiu's aura instantly became dangerous. Clan leader Mao Yang, do you mean that if we don't agree we'll be trapped here forever? Mao Yang seemed to chuckle. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon clan rarely interacts with the human race, this is not a difficult matter for us. His words didn't hide his arrogance at all. This was the confidence of an ancient divine beast. Divine Dragon Island was their territory. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with two humans? If it weren't for the fact that Rong Xiu had an extraordinary status in the Divine Ruins world, they wouldn't have wasted so much time and energy. Therefore, to Mao Yang and the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, their actions were already quite restrained and polite. Both sides were in a stalemate. The air was cold and silent. At this moment, a person walked over quickly with a nervous expression. Clan leader. Outside Divine Dragon Island, a few humans were approaching. Mao Yang frowned slightly. For this kind of matter, you can just deal with it according to the usual rules. Why do you need to interfere? Under normal circumstances, very few humans would come here. On one hand, they didn't dare to. On the other hand, there were very few people who knew the location of Divine Dragon Island. Occasionally, some people would accidentally come here, and the guards below would basically chase them away. If there were any daring people, they would just kill them. Logically speaking, this kind of matter shouldn't alarm clan leader Mao Yang. The guard who came to report instantly broke out in cold sweat. How could he not know these rules? But the key point was, the people who came this time were not ordinary. Moreover, clan leader, among those people, there seems to be a crimson gold sky phoenix. Mao Yang's expression turned stern. What did you say? Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat when he heard this and he turned around to look. That description really sounded like... Everyone in the square also looked at each other and became restless. It can't be? There's actually a crimson gold sky phoenix so daring to barge into Divine Dragon Island? Could it be that they're courting death? We don't have much contact with them and we won't easily step into their territory. What's going on today? What's wrong with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Or, are they deliberately looking for trouble? Everyone was discussing animatedly. Obviously, the arrival of this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix had caused quite a stir in their hearts. It wasn't fear but vigilance and suspicion. The two clans had always maintained a delicate balance, and whoever wanted to break it would have to pay a huge price. Mao Yang said in a deep voice, "What's going on? Tell me in detail." That person hurriedly bowed and recounted the matter in detail. Mao Yang and everyone else's expression changed again and again. "You're saying that the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is a little girl?" That person lowered his head even more, and his whole body was covered in cold sweat. "I'm not sure, but the aura of that girl is undoubtedly that of a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. How is this possible?" The two great ancient divine beasts had to reach adulthood before they could transform into human form. Suddenly, Mao Yang thought of something and his gaze turned to Chu Luiyue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1738. He recalled that he had indeed received some news before. When Shangguanyu left the Phoenix God Mountain, he brought a 3 or 4-year-old girl with him. At that time he had thought about it for a long time, but he still couldn't get an answer. But now, a ridiculous and bold guess appeared in Mao Yang's mind. A look of deep shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be? Looks like Dumpling is here. Chu Liyue's lips curled up slightly. The ones who came with Dumpling should be Taizu, Master, and Father. Their movements were really fast. Chu Liyue's heart, which was originally hanging in the air, was half relieved. Originally she was still worried about them. Now that she heard that they were here, she naturally felt more at ease. On second thought, she guessed that Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu shouldn't have come together. Otherwise, the Divine Dragon Island would have been in chaos. After all, those two had special identities, so this was the most suitable choice. Hearing Chu Liyue's words, Mao Yang's heart sank. As expected, that so-called 3 or 4-year-old girl was definitely the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix that Shangguanyu had contracted. They went to the Phoenix God Mountain. Not only did they not receive any punishment, they even helped the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix transform into a human form? Mao Yang's mind raced and his face turned gloomy. All these years he had never heard of a young ancient divine beast that could successfully transform into a human form. How did that little girl do it? The biggest possibility was that the power of her bloodline was extremely powerful. But as for how outstanding it was, even Mao Yang didn't dare to be sure. After all, such a thing had never happened in the great Phoenix Dragon clan. This made him feel bewildered and aggrieved. At the same time, it also made him even more puzzled. Shangguanyu was here, but that Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and a few other humans came over in such a short period of time. It was very likely that there was a contract between them. But how was that possible? Yi Zhao definitely wouldn't agree. He had always been prejudiced against humans, and he would even despise them if they spoke an extra word. How could he allow his people to maintain a contract with Shangguanyu? Mao Yang suppressed the many emotions in his heart, but his expression did not change. "Are you certain that there is only one Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix?" If someone had secretly followed them here, that person nodded and cautiously said, "This subordinate has already investigated carefully. There are no traces or auras of other Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenixes in the vicinity of Divine Dragon Island. Furthermore, she had transformed into the appearance of a little girl. The appearance of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix was already enough to shock them. When they saw that she was only 3 or 4 years old, their jaws almost dropped in shock. Only then did he return to report in a fluster. Mao Yang fell silent. Chu Liyue smiled. "Clan leader Mao Yang, Dumpling and the others have personally come to take us back. Are you still not going to let them go?" Mao Yang gave her a deep look. Ever since Mao Yao suffered a loss at the hands of this woman, he knew that she was not a simple person. At that time, when he heard that she had left Phoenix Mountain unscathed, he was even more determined. It was just that, only now did he realize that he had still underestimated her. This Shangguanyu looked very young. Her eyes were clear and clean and she always had a smile on her face. In fact, she was very thoughtful and had many secrets hidden in her body. "I can't underestimate her." Mao Yang thought so and said indifferently, "It's their business that they are here. As for whether to let you go, I've already made it very clear just now. You can think about it yourselves." Although his voice was calm, his attitude was very firm. It was obvious that he would not change his previous suggestion. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. Mao Yang looked at the person who reported the news. Go back to them and tell them that the clan is holding the 1000 Summit. Everyone is busy and it's not convenient to entertain them. If it had been anyone else from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who came rashly, he would not have been so polite. However, the one who came was Shangguan Yu's contracted magical beast. Moreover, she seemed to be very young. If he used force and word got out, outsiders would probably say that he was bullying a child. Therefore, after thinking about it, Mao Yang decided to just shut them out. Yes. After receiving the order, the person quickly left. However, the crowd still had different expressions on their faces. Even Mao Yang did not understand the reason behind this, let alone them. In fact, they really wanted to find out what was going on. Mao Yang raised his hand. Men, please go to 7 Lotus Mountain to rest. I'm afraid you two will have to suffer during this period of time. When you think it through, we can continue the discussion. The same. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 tall men walked up from the side. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. They were going to put them under house arrest. Just as she was about to say something, Rong Xiu's fingers suddenly brushed across her palm. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She turned her head to look. Rong Xiu's calm and deep eyes were clear. She could not see anything wrong with them. She swallowed the rest of her words. Rong Xiu looked at Mao Yang and smiled faintly. Then I'll have to impose on you for this period of time. Mao Yang's chest tightened. Rong Xiu did not seem to care about his threats at all. He even wanted to enjoy himself here as a guest. Mao Yang felt a little disgusted. Whether it was Rong Xiu or Shangguan Yu, they gave him a feeling that he could not control them. This made him very unhappy. He snorted coldly. I hope you two can think it through soon. After all, there are still people waiting for you outside. Outside Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling and the others finally found the place after a long journey. At this time, they were standing on a long and seemingly endless coast. In front of them was an endless dark blue sea. There was a huge barrier where the sky and the earth met. The pressure was very strong. Needless to say, that was Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling looked over from time to time. Shangguan Jing and the others looked a little serious. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to get people from Divine Dragon Island. At this time, a figure flew out of the barrier. They were shocked. They immediately became nervous. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1739. When they had just arrived, it was this man who had stopped them. After Nansu Huai explained his identity and purpose, the man turned around and returned to Divine Dragon Island, saying that he needed to ask for instructions. They didn't expect him to return so quickly. Dumpling glanced behind the man and was disappointed when she didn't see Chu Liyue. Nansu Huai and the rest also felt uneasy. The man stopped in the middle of the sea and stood in the air. He looked at them solemnly and then conveyed Mao Yang's words. As soon as she finished her words, Tuanzi was furious. What do you mean by this? You're not letting us in to see Ayu? The man glanced at Tuanzi meaningfully and looked her up and down for a long time before he said, You're still young. Although you're young, you're still a descendant of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Don't you know the rules? It was already too much for them to appear here, let alone let them in. If it wasn't for the 1000 Summit and the fact that this little girl was very young and was Shangguan Yu's contracted fiend beast, how could the clan leader let them off so easily? I'll give you one last piece of advice. This isn't a place where you can come. Leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Dumpling was even angrier. What did you say? She had painstakingly found her way here and was finally about to see Ayu. How could these people not let her in? She would never agree to it. Dumpling wanted to say something, but Nansu Huai suddenly persuaded her. Dumpling, we're here to look for you, not to cause trouble. No matter how much they wanted to see the two of them, the great Phoenix Dragon clan had already expressed their attitude. If they were to force it, they would lose more than they gained. Even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to cause trouble on Divine Dragon Island. Hearing this, Tuanzi finally restrained herself. She wasn't afraid of other things, but she really didn't want to cause trouble for Ayu. She stomped her feet angrily and turned her head away angrily. Nansu Huai took a step forward and stood in front of Dumpling, cupping his fists politely. Actually, we didn't come here with any other intentions. Since it's not convenient to disturb them now, then, I wonder if you can reveal if they're safe and sound? As long as we know this, we can leave with peace of mind. Nansu Huai was the dean of Lingxiao College and had a high status. Now that he spoke politely and courteously, the person opposite him didn't want to offend him and his expression softened. Of course they're fine. They just need to stay in our clan for a while to deal with some matters. When the matter was over, they would leave. Of course, he couldn't reveal the real reason. Nan Suhui furrowed his brows. Just now, when this person urged them to leave, he felt that something was wrong, and now it seemed that it was true. It seemed like Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu wouldn't be leaving Divine Dragon Island anytime soon. It was obvious that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would not let them off so easily if they barged in. There was an 80% chance that they were trapped here. Shangguan Jing suddenly said. If that's the case, let's go first. Tuanzi was just about to say no, when Shangguan Jing gently patted her hair bun. Dumpling, be good. Dumpling was very smart. She had already sensed that the atmosphere was a little strange. After thinking for a while, she finally pouted and nodded. Then the few of them bade farewell and turned to leave. However, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race didn't seem to trust them and kept staring at them. After walking for a long distance, the feeling of being spied on finally disappeared. At this time, they were basically far away from Divine Dragon Island. Nan Suhui looked back with a solemn expression. It seems that the two of them aren't in a good situation. For so many years, no human had stepped onto Divine Dragon Island. Now that the two of them suddenly broke in and happened to be at the so-called Thousand Peaks, they were definitely in trouble. Dumpling was anxious and worried. What should we do? Will Ayu and the others be in danger? I saw that the person just now was very fierce. The other people of their race must not be any better. Nan Suhui comforted her. Dumpling, you don't have to worry about this for the time being. Rong Xiao and you are not ordinary people. Even the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Moreover, Rong Xiao was there. Nan Suhui wasn't worried that they would be in danger. He just felt that this matter would be very troublesome. Dumpling heard his calm and determined tone and unconsciously felt more at ease. She nodded as if she understood. Then, she looked in the direction of Divine Dragon Island with hesitation. Then, are we really going to leave like this? She didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay and go to Divine Dragon Island to find Ayu. Nan Suhui smiled. Of course we can't leave like this. We just have to change our method. The defense of Divine Dragon Island is already very strong. Now that they are holding the Thousand Peaks Summit, it will only be more strict. It's as difficult as ascending to the heavens for them to enter openly. Shangguan Jing frowned. That's right. After this incident, they will only be more vigilant against us. If it were any other place, we might be able to give it a try. But Divine Dragon Island, it's really impossible. He and Nan Suhui were among the top experts in the Divine Ruins world. Although Chu Ning's realm was low, he had an extremely rare indestructible divine body. Dumpling was even more so. She was the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. When the few of them worked together, their strength was absolutely indisputable. Ordinary people were no match for them. Even if there were many notorious and dangerous places, they could still enter them. Shangguan Jing originally thought that with Dumpling leading the way, they would definitely be able to find Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao smoothly. When he was sent to the northern region of the primitive desolation, didn't he also survive? But he never expected that the two of them would be sent directly to Divine Dragon Island. This was a huge problem for them. Unless the Great Phoenix Dragon clan took the initiative to release them, otherwise. Dumpling raised her head and looked at them. Even if she was not afraid of anything, she knew that this matter was very troublesome. She pulled Nan Suhui's clothes. Grandpa Dean, you must have a way, right? Although everyone was very worried about this matter, she always felt that Grandpa Dean seemed to be exceptionally calm and steady. Nan Suhui was silent for a moment. Now is the time when the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan is most vigilant. It's not suitable for us to take action. Let's wait here for a while and see what happens. This was indeed the most suitable method now. Dumpling nodded. Shangguan Jing's frown deepened. Previously, because of the Great Phoenix Dragon skeleton, you could be considered to have formed a grudge with them. This time, I'm afraid they won't let it go so easily. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1740. Of course, the Great Phoenix Dragon and the rest were still brooding over this matter. Especially Mao Yang. He was the clan leader. This matter was like a slap to the face of the entire clan. It had completely humiliated him. Naturally, he had a deep enmity towards Chu Luiyue in his heart. However, he had always been good at disguising himself. Even if he wanted to kill someone, he rarely showed his ferocity. Often he would take someone's life while chatting. Now he was treating Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao the same way. After ordering his subordinates to send them off, the Thousand Peak Conference continued. However, the thoughts of many people present had already drifted away. There were 2 extra people on the Divine Dragon Island for no reason. How could they not be concerned? Moreover, although the Thousand Peak Conference was held in a grand manner, there was really nothing shocking about it. It was difficult for everyone to concentrate again. Even Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table, felt a little bored as he looked at the juniors who came up to test their talents and strength. In fact, they roughly knew how strong these people were. The Thousand Peak Conference's test was just a chance for them to compete with each other openly. Mao Yang half leaned on the chair. He could not help but recall the scene that had just happened. Clan leader, clan leader? After an unknown period of time, an elder's voice brought Mao Yang back to his senses. The test is basically over. Do you think it's time to prepare to open the Great Void Temple? Mao Yang's hand knocked on the armrest of the chair. His gaze swept across the people below. The juniors who were participating in the test were now divided into 2 sides. However, their expressions were poles apart at this moment. On one side they were full of energy. Most of their faces were filled with excitement and joy. These were the ones who were more outstanding and had met the requirements to enter the Great Void Temple. On the other side, those who looked gloomy and stood with their hands by their sides were obviously those who had been eliminated. Looking at the faces of these juniors, Mao Yang's mood suddenly became a little gloomy. He thought of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix who had transformed into a human form at a young age. Among the people in front of him, even the most outstanding 1 or 2 had only transformed into a human form after they had reached adulthood. Compared to that crimson gold heavenly phoenix, the difference was truly too great. Originally, Mao Yang was quite satisfied with them, but when he thought about how the crimson gold sky phoenix clan actually produced such a peerless genius, he suddenly felt unhappy. Comparisons were odious. This sentence couldn't be more appropriate for the 2 ancient divine beast clans. With such a genius appearing, the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan side actually did not have the slightest bit of news before. This was truly doing great things in silence. However, Mao Yang felt a little better when he recalled that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix was still maintaining its contract with the Shangguanyu. This kind of thing was extremely taboo for them. It was definitely a huge stain on their reputation. If Shangguanyu was dead, then the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Mao Yang's eyelids drooped slightly, concealing the emotions in his eyes. When he looked up again, his eyes had already regained their usual calmness. He nodded. Yes, we can start preparing now. On the other side, Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue were escorted to 7 Lotus Mountain. Divine Dragon Island was really an isolated island, but it was very large. The island was covered in lush mountains. This 7 Lotus Mountain was one of them. Among the many beautiful and steep mountain peaks, the 7 Lotus Mountain looked ordinary and unremarkable. There was nothing eye-catching about it. However, as soon as they approached, Chu Luiyue sensed that the barrier around 7 Lotus Mountain seemed to be stronger than the barriers around the other mountains. 7 Lotus Mountain is very quiet. I'll have to trouble the 2 of you to rest here for a period of time. The 2 great phoenix dragons in charge of escorting them opened the barrier with cold faces and gestured for them to enter. Rong Xiao's lips curled up slightly. He followed the good advice and held Chu Luiyue's hand, bringing her in. As soon as the 2 of them entered, the barrier behind them was sealed again. The clan leader said that the 2 of you can just tell us when you've thought it through. We'll be waiting here at any time. It was obvious that they were going to be imprisoned. Rong Xiao's thin lips curled up slightly. He did not pay much attention to them and brought Chu Luiyue to the mountainside. Over there was a cave. Almost no one had come to Divine Dragon Island. Other than the Great Void Temple, there were very few houses. Most of the great phoenix dragons preferred to live in caves, and this place was no exception. Chu Luiyue looked around and her eyes finally stopped at the entrance of the cave. The entrance of the cave wasn't particularly big, but from here, it was pitch black inside. It made one's heart turn cold for some reason. Chu Luiyue said. It seems that no one has come to this cave for a long time. There were weeds everywhere and there was a desolate aura everywhere. Rong Xiao smiled faintly. It's not just this cave. No one has set foot in the entire 7 Lotus Mountain for a long time. Chu Luiyue nodded. She had already noticed earlier that the entire 7 Lotus Peak was deserted, without the slightest sign of life. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. It seemed that other than the 2 of them, there was no other life here. Strange, she glanced behind her. This place is not far from the Great Void Temple. Why is it so desolate? From here, she could even see the majestic and solemn Great Void Temple standing at the peak of the mountain. Mao Yang and the others were holding the Thousand Summit in the square in front of the Great Void Temple. Rongxiu smiled and let her in. It's good that it's quiet. Otherwise people will come and disturb us. As soon as he finished speaking, his sleeves fluttered. A ball of golden flame flew out and burned in front of the cave entrance. Crackle. The surrounding weeds were quickly burned to ashes. Chu Luiyue saw a wisp of greenish-black smoke floating out of the flame. She frowned. That's something dirty, but it's nothing to worry about. Rongxiu chuckled and retracted the flame. Chu Luiyue clearly felt that the cave entrance seemed to be different from before. She walked a little closer. This feeling became more and more intense. Rongxiu took a step forward and walked into the cave. The two of them interlocked their fingers. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and followed him. Just as she walked in, Chu Luiyue looked around and suddenly saw something. She stopped in her tracks and her pupils constricted. On the mountain wall there were deep marks. It looked like it was slashed by something sharp, but Chu Luiyue could not figure out what kind of sharp weapon could leave such marks. Until she saw a pool of blood at the side. It was dark red and dried. It had completely seeped into the mountain wall. In an instant, a white light flashed in her heart. It said that an ancestor of the great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe once went mad during cultivation. He killed 7 of his tribe members in one night. After that, he was imprisoned. After 100 days of torture, he was finally killed and died. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. It seems that this 7 Lotus Peak was the cage that imprisoned him. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1741. Chu Luiyue was taken aback. Something like this happened in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan? Why haven't I heard of it before? Previously, when she was looking up information related to the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, she had also looked up a lot of information about the Great Phoenix Dragons and had some understanding of them. However, she had never heard of this before. Rongxiu smiled and glanced at her. Why would they be willing to let outsiders know about such a scandal? After the incident back then, the Great Phoenix Dragons had spent a lot of effort to seal the news. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. That's true. Killing 7 of their own in one night. This kind of thing was definitely a big deal in any clan or sect, let alone the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, which had always been high and mighty. Chu Luiyue paused and did not ask why Rongxiu knew about this. He even had a way to know about the earth-shattering battle in the Divine Ruins world, let alone this. Rongxiu was very resourceful and well-informed. She had already seen this before and was not surprised by it now. She raised her head again and carefully looked at the marks on the mountain wall. The mountain rocks on Divine Dragon Island were different from the rocks in the outside world. They were much harder. To be able to leave these marks on the mountain wall, one could see what kind of power was used back then. These marks were messy, but it was not difficult to see how crazy and miserable the person who was trapped here back then was. Looking at the pool of dark red blood again, Chu Luiyue was even a little shocked. These are things that happened many years ago. Don't worry about it. Rongxiu's slightly rough fingers gently rubbed against her hand, and he comforted her gently and powerfully. Chu Luiyue nodded. I just feel a little puzzled. Logically speaking, this place should be the forbidden area of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Why did they directly put us here? If they wanted to imprison them, which place on Divine Dragon Island would not be more suitable than this place? No wonder this place was so cold and desolate. The people of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would not want to step into this place unless it was a special situation. Rongxiu looked at the marks on the mountain wall. A sharp glint flashed in the corner of his eyes. He chuckled. They naturally have their reasons. Then he took out a pearl. The bright light instantly illuminated the two of them. Chu Luiyue looked inside. The path in the cave was winding and led all the way to the inside. Therefore, standing here, it was pitch black and nothing could be seen. With the illumination of this pearl, it was naturally much better. Rongxiu looked at her sideways and asked with a smile, "Do you want to go in and take a look?" Chu Luiyue knew very well that the deeper one went, the more dangerous it would be. However, she still nodded without hesitation. Look. Mao Yang clearly had other motives for locking the two of them up here. Instead of waiting passively, it was better to take the initiative to attack. Rongxiu held her hand tightly. The two of them continued to walk inside. In front of the Great Void Temple. The last person had finally finished his test. Mao Yang sighed in his heart. In the end, there was no one who was particularly outstanding. Now, he could only hope that they would have some good fortune after entering the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang stood up with his usual gentle smile on his face. Even the elder who was sitting closest to him did not notice his thoughts. Everyone followed suit and stood up. Mao Yang looked at the batch of winners and said, "Now everyone's test is over. The fact that you can stand here proves that you are all favored by the heavens." When he spoke, he was full of energy and had an encouraging smile on his face. It was easy to make these young children happy and excited. However, this is only the beginning. The next trial is the true test you will face at the Thousand Summit this time. Mao Yang paused and his voice became more dignified. "The Great Void Temple will open soon. You all enter in order. Inside the temple, there are the inheritances and treasures of your ancestors. Whether you can obtain the opportunity and improve further depends on this." The square was silent. However, in the eyes of the younger generation, there was unconcealable excitement and impulsiveness. They were well aware of how important this match was to them. If they could really obtain the favor of an ancestor, their future would be limitless. Mao Yang looked around and nodded in satisfaction. "You should all know that the people in the clan basically only have this one chance. Once you miss this chance, you won't be able to do it again in the future. So, seize this opportunity, understand?" "Yes." Many young boys and girls responded, unable to hide their excitement. Mao Yang raised his hand and waved it suddenly. "Great Void Temple, open." Rumble. A loud rumble came from the Great Void Temple behind him. All the elders exerted their strength together. Several streams of light danced and intertwined. They surrounded the entire Great Void Temple. Immediately after, a dragon's roar seemed to come from a distant time and space, resounding through the heavens and earth. Creak. The door of the Great Void Temple finally opened slowly. "Let's go." The younger generation who could no longer hold back immediately moved and flashed into the Great Void Temple. Their silhouettes quickly disappeared behind the door. At the same time, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao, who were exploring the cave of Seven Lotus Peak, also heard the shocking dragon's roar. Both of them stopped at almost the same time. Chu Luiyue could not help but turn back to take a look. At this time they had already walked into the depths of the cave. Even if they turned back, they could not see anything. But that dragon's roar was too shocking, causing their blood to boil. Clearly, there was such a distance between them. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The owner of the dragon's roar was definitely more powerful than Mao Yang. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan was an ancient divine beast born in the chaos, and was on par with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan. No matter what, they could not be ignored. The dragon's roar gradually dissipated, but Chu Luiyue could still feel it lingering in her ears and could not be dismissed. Suddenly, a slight fluctuation came from her body. Chu Luiyue was stunned. "Zichen?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1742. Speaking of which, Zichen had been silent for a long time. Even when they encountered such a big change in the god-slaying mound, Zichen did not react. He had always been a man of few words and would not come out unless it was a critical moment. Chu Luiyue had long been used to it. She just did not expect that he would actually make a move at this time. "I'm fine." Sensing her surprise, Zichen replied. His voice was as low and hoarse as ever. However, it was not the first day that Chu Luiyue had met him, and now that they had a contract between them, Zichen's thoughts could not be hidden from Chu Luiyue. "Is it because of the dragon's roar?" Chu Luiyue asked tentatively. Zichen was silent for a moment before he said, "Yes." This answer was simple and direct, but it made Chu Luiyue frown. She pondered for a moment, then suddenly remembered something. Those two wing bones. There were two wing bones of the great phoenix dragon in Zichen's body. Could it be because of this? So, the dragon's roar came from the first ancestor of the great phoenix dragon. That's why it has such a powerful summoning power. Zichen explained. Chu Luiyue's expression became a little strange. In fact, when Zichen spoke, she had already guessed the reason for the whole thing. There were two bones in Zichen's body, and he had fused with the purest power of the entire skeleton. Hearing the call of the ancestor, the bloodline power of the great phoenix dragon buried in Zichen's body fluctuated. It was very simple and easy to figure out. But the point was, what was this? Zichen was the legendary three-eyed eagle. If he was really related to the ancient divine beast, it should be the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. He had nothing to do with the great phoenix dragon, but now, because he had fused with the bloodline power, he could sense the call of the great phoenix dragon's ancestor. This was simply... Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes when he noticed that something was wrong with Chu Luiyue's expression. Or what's wrong? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. After thinking about it, she decided to tell Rong Xiu about it. Although it sounded strange, they were in someone else's territory, so they had to be extra careful. Rong Xiu was stunned when he heard that. Immediately after, a faint light seemed to flash through those deep phoenix eyes. At this time, Chu Luiyue was having an incessant headache. He was massaging his temples and did not notice the subtle changes in his expression. It's just 2 skeletons and a strand of bloodline power. I don't think it'll affect them too much. Rong Xiu smiled and comforted. In this world, there are many divine beasts with similar bloodline powers. But in the end, this is different. Chu Luiyue nodded. What she was most worried about was whether things would develop in an unexpected direction. The 2 wing bones and the bloodline power that had fused with Zichen's body were like buried landmines. Chu Luiyue was afraid that they would explode. Of course, this was only her own conjecture. Just as Rong Xiu said, Zichen had only fused with these powers, but he was still a legendary 3-eyed eagle after all. It shouldn't affect him too much. Chu Luiyue thought silently. Zichen, are you sure you're okay? Chu Luiyue was still worried and asked again. Zichen responded. Chu Luiyue gradually let down her guard. She had spent a lot of effort to help Zichen reconstruct his physical body. She didn't want Zichen to be implicated because of the 2 wing bones. After confirming that Zichen was fine, Chu Luiyue put away her thoughts and continued to move deeper into the cave with Rong Xiu. The depth of this cave was far beyond Chu Luiyue's initial estimation. She had thought that this was just an ordinary cave with some twists and turns. But as they walked, she realized that she was too naive. This cave was really deep. No, perhaps it should be said that it was really winding. Walking in this cave, the path was either wide or narrow. Every time they walked a certain distance, there would be a turn. After a long time, it was easy to get lost, and it was even difficult to distinguish the direction. Chu Luiyue didn't have such a problem. She had always been excellent in this aspect. Such a terrain didn't pose a problem for her at all. Thus, she quickly realized that they seemed to be just going around in circles in this area. Chu Luiyue looked around in the light of the pearl. They were already very far from the entrance of the cave, but there seemed to be more claw marks on the mountain walls. In fact, along the way they had seen these marks on the surrounding mountain walls. From time to time, there were also some dried and ancient bloodstains. Chu Luiyue's expression was calm, but her heart was filled with horror. The great phoenix dragon that had been imprisoned here back then must have gone through excruciating torture before it died. Even today, many years later, this hatred and madness, even hysteria, was still shocking to the core. Chu Luiyue's heart unconsciously became heavy. During this process, within her dantian, Zichen's body no longer emitted the same fluctuations as before. The 2 of them walked in silence. After about an hour they stopped together. We were here just now. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and said softly. Rong Xiu nodded. It seems that that person back then was trapped here and couldn't get out. Chu Luiyue looked around. They had been walking here for a long time, but they always seemed to be circling. This is actually an illusion, she muttered softly. When they came in, she didn't notice at all. This illusion was so realistic that it was almost impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. The secluded path was deep and silent. They seemed to be unable to get out. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1743. Outside the Great Void Temple, Mao Yang and the elders of the clan were waiting quietly. Their gazes were fixed on the towering Great Void Temple. The bright sunlight fell on the roof, reflecting a noble and gorgeous light. It was majestic, solemn, and sacred. I wonder if there will be a few lucky ones this time. Mao Xin is the most outstanding one among the younger generation, right? I can't say for the others, but Mao Xin will definitely succeed. Hey, how can you be sure about something like a lucky chance? There used to be people who didn't have the best talents, but they got extremely powerful inheritances, right? I think before they come out, it's hard to say what will happen. Everyone discussed in a low voice. The elder next to him looked at Mao Yang and asked with a smile, "Leader, do you think there's anyone you like?" Mao Yang smiled faintly. They're right. No one can tell what will happen until the last moment. At this time, his attitude was always more conservative. Everyone was used to it and didn't think much of it. Mao Yang looked for a while and suddenly asked, "By the way, have those people outside the Divine Dragon Island left?" The elder hurriedly said, "Just now, the people below reported back that they have already left. You were opening the Taishu temple at that time, so we didn't have time to tell you." Mao Yang frowned slightly. That crimson gold heavenly phoenix also left? The elder nodded affirmatively. They saw those people leave with their own eyes. Also, I've just asked them to strengthen the patrols and guard. No one is allowed to come close to the Divine Dragon Island. Don't worry. Mao Yang nodded, but he was a little suspicious. That crimson gold heavenly phoenix was Shangguan Yu's contracted divine beast. How could it just leave like that? According to what Rong Xiu said, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix should have chased after them from the god-slaying tomb. It must have been tough for them to travel thousands of miles. They were sent away just because of this? He paused and said, "Send more people. Send more people to keep a close eye on them. We can't afford to make any mistakes before the Thousand Peak Conference ends." Yes. Mao Yang's lips moved. He wanted to send someone to investigate the background of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix and find out what happened during the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix ancestral worship ceremony. But on second thought he suppressed these thoughts. Now was the most important time for the Thousand Summit, so it was not appropriate for him to take care of these matters. Besides, it was obvious that Yi Zhao had his own plans for keeping the news a secret. If he didn't want anyone to know, no one would be able to find out. At a time like this, there was no need to confront Yi Zhao and the others head-on. At this moment, he caught a glimpse of a figure walking over quickly from the corner of his eyes. He was one of the guards who escorted Rong Xiu and Shangguan Yu. "Greetings, Patriarch." That person walked straight to Mao Yang and bowed respectfully. Mao Yang nodded. "Rise. What about the two of them? Are there any abnormal reactions?" The guard lowered his head and said, "Not at all." Mao Yang's expression changed slightly. "Really?" The guard nodded. "After arriving at 7 Lotus Peak, we opened the barrier, and the two of them went straight in without saying anything. Seems normal." Mao Yang was silent for a moment. 7 Lotus Peak was an extremely special place on Divine Dragon Island. The two of them would definitely sense that something was wrong. But why was there no reaction at all? Countless thoughts flashed through Mao Yang's mind, but his face was calm and gentle as usual. "Then let's continue to watch. If there's anything wrong, report it immediately." Yes. A day passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone in front of the Temple of Void was still waiting quietly. Suddenly, a wave came from the Temple of Void. Everyone focused their attention on the screen. Then they saw the door open and a figure flew out from it. Bang! That person fell heavily to the ground, and there was a trace of pain on his face. Then the door closed. The whole process was smooth and clean. Many people were disappointed. A white-robed elder standing in front of the main hall looked at the youth lying on the ground and said in a deep voice, "Mao Shang eliminated." Hearing this, the youth's face showed a trace of unwillingness and shame. He was the first one to be eliminated. Countless gazes fell on him, making him feel as if there were daggers at his back. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain, stood up, bowed in the direction of the Temple of Void, and then left with a gloomy expression. Everyone in the tribe only had one chance in their life to enter the Temple of Void to search for the inheritance. This time he did not get anything, and in the future, his originally burning hope was suddenly splashed with a bucket of cold water, and no one would feel good about it. Moreover, he was still young and hot-blooded. The square was very quiet. Some people glanced at the youth and then looked away expressionlessly. This was all too common for them. Generally speaking, this last stage would take the longest time. In this process, those who did not get the inheritance and opportunity would be kicked out one after another. This was just the beginning, and it would take about a month until the end of the journey. Only a day had passed and there was still a long wait. Mao Yang's expression was gentle. "Go back and cultivate well, and you may have a chance to stand out in the future." The youth's expression became better, and he bowed to Mao Yang gratefully. Although the tribe leader was of noble status, he was always very kind to them. Even those who were not good enough, he never looked down on them. This made many people in the tribe respect him even more. Of course, there were a few elders who objected, saying that the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe was an ancient divine beast, and their status should be determined by the power of their bloodline and their true strength. However, Mao Yang was the tribe leader after all, and they did not dare to go overboard. After a few persuasions, seeing that Mao Yang was still the same, they did not mention it again. Mao Yang looked in the direction of 7 Lotus Peak. A day had passed and there was still no movement from the two of them. "I wonder how the situation is now. How can they be so calm after being locked up in that place?" Mao Yang frowned but soon returned to normal. He looked away and once again focused on the Temple of Void. Anyway, there would be a day when they could not hold on. 7 Lotus Peak. Inside the cave, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu sat face to face on the ground. Between the two of them, there was a chessboard outlined with bright lines. On the chessboard the two of them fought fiercely. After these two people realized that this was an illusion, they didn't want to go out and directly started playing chess here. Chu Luiyue rested her chin on one hand, and her slender fingers gently tapped on her chin, her eyes fixed on the chessboard. After a moment her eyes lit up, and she placed another piece. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.